Hey everyone, Disappointed Giant here. Welcome to the fourth video in my tier list series. So this video is going to be one of two things. Originally my plan was to go through and do all of the traps and turrets and the grenades in one video, and then I was going to move on to all of what the game calls powers or skills or whatever you want to call them in another video. But I'd like to do them all in one. So instead of doing video 4, traps and grenades, video 5, powers, I'm going to try to get through all of these at once. What I'll do is by the time I get down to the holy water, if I'm still feeling the vibe and things are flowing, I'll get through the rest. And if not, I will record another tier list video in the near future. I know some of my other ones have been a little bit more spaced out, but if I don't get through all of this in one sitting, I want to put them out pretty close together since they're pretty related. You know, as a lot of you folks know, all of these items belong on like the same buttons, right? So you have your 2 skill slots, so it doesn't matter if you have your ice armor, Barnacle, Grappling Hook, smoke bomb. It doesn't matter if you have any of those, which ones you have, I should say, because they're all going to kind of be in that same pool as far as button resources. So I kind of feel like they're all part of the same family, you know? And just like my other tier lists, and I'm just going to kind of get into this. I know my other tier lists, I kind of like talk, you know, shoot the breeze a little bit about just kind of like what's been going on and stuff. But I really just want to kind of get into the meat of this one, get into the tofu of this one for the vegetarians and vegans out there. Like all my other tier lists, these have some loose, I don't know, rules, if you want to call them that, guidelines. And basically, we'll just go through these top to bottom. The audio is uncut in a single take with no script. So I just hit record on my Logic, and I plugged in my microphone, I hit record, and I started recording my screen, and that's it. So I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know how long this is going to go. I don't know what I'm going to say, but that's kind of what makes it, that's what makes it fun. It's almost like this is like the Dead Cells Tiers List podcast, right? You just sit down with the mic and your pop filter and just start talking. So whatever comes out is what comes out. I'm not ranking these items by what someone may think of as the quote-unquote best items. As you'll see here, I don't have S, A, B, etc. I have frequency. So if something is up here in the always category, that means that's an item that I'll take that most of the time. If there's something up here in the usually category, you can assume I take it usually. Things that I don't take often, sometimes, etc. And these frequencies are not meant to be definitive. So just because I take something a lot or I don't take something often, that doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't do that yourself. A lot of what's exciting to me about Dead Cells and what has kept me hooked and what seems to keep a lot of other people interested is the amount of variety in builds, the different situations you can find yourself in, and the variety of items that you can use. So that way you're not just always picking up the same things over and over and over again. And of course you could do that, right? You could start a run where every brutality build has a fire grenade and oil grenade, so that way you're constantly getting fire, you're getting your burning oil synergy, whatever it might be. But as you can see here, there are so many options and there's so many combinations, right? You could take Flamethrower Turret and Cleaver. You could take Knife Dance and Face Flask. You could take Leghugger and Serenade, right? And that's just brutality. And I'm just clicking here. You know, you could do Lacerating Aura and Powerful Grenade or Sinew Slicer, right? There's so many different things here, and like that's what makes it exciting. So again, this isn't a definitive quote unquote ranking. This is the Dead Cells podcast, right? We're just gonna chat. We're gonna shoot the breeze about these items. We'll go over some stats, talk about some things, and then move on to the next one. And speaking of moving on, I'm gonna go through the main items in the game first for each respective section, and then I'll go through the DLCs in their order of release. So that way I'm not excluding people by kind of popping DLC stuff in the middle. If you don't have any of the DLCs, or if there's certain DLCs that you don't have, you're welcome to obviously skip those sections. But this way, at least, you know, a big chunk is going to be what everyone has available, or everyone can have available if you find the blueprints. A couple of these are a little rare. And then finally, the way that I rank these, in addition to frequency, is going to be alphabetical. So that way there's no specific hierarchy on the tier list, right? So if I'm going through these first three, it would be double Crossb-o-matic would be the first one, heavy turret would be the second one, and then Sinew Slicer would be the third, just because of the letters in their names, not because that's the order in which I prefer them. That way it kind of flattens everything, right? I mean, I don't even know if accessibility is the right word. Maybe approachability, maybe whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what the right word is, but just so that way everything, the playing field's even, right? Let's flatten everything out. We'll just talk about my experience, not ranks as far as what's the best, etc. So that way we can just kind of like let it roll, right? We'll let it roll. And I think that's it. Before I get into this, I just want to quickly say, first of all, thank you for watching. These videos can get a little long in the tooth. They can get pretty chunky. So thank you for being here and for listening to this, for having interest in Dead Cells and in my channel, which has been great. Also, thank you to everyone who's been commenting and, you know, having discussions with me about different things over the channel and with all the different videos, especially over like the past like couple weeks. It's been really nice to kind of get into some other other topics of discussion with folks, you know, talking about some scripting and audio and just general stuff. It's been really cool. So thank you for being here. And without further ado, let's get rolling. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the double Crossb-o-matic. So this is a tactics only trap. You can find it, it's a rare blueprint from the zombies, so those are the traditional beginning of the game green folks that you'll see. It's a rare blueprint, costs 10 cells to unlock, and the way that it works is basically, let me just go back to the wiki real quick. So the way that it works is that you drop the turret and it will shoot projectiles in both directions. So I think that's what the double is, right? So if you have an enemy on the left of the trap and you have an enemy on the right of the trap, it's gonna shoot projectiles at both of those. This is a very basic turret, in my opinion. You just throw it down, and like most other turrets, it has I don't know if it tells you what the distance is. Yeah, I'm not sure what the distance is as far as how far you can be from it while it's still active. I'm pretty sure it's the same amongst most of the turrets. But, you know, this is something that you can just drop down a platform. You can, you know, toss it, crash open a door and toss it behind the door to get enemies. And it just does good damage. Like I said, it's just like your basic turret. And that's kind of why I wanted to start here, because it doesn't have extra affixes, doesn't have extra kind of functions. You just throw it down and it starts pelting enemies with arrows. One of the cool things about this turret is that the DPS will double when it shoots 2 arrows. So my understanding of this is that if there's one enemy on either side, let's say each arrow does 5 damage or whatever it is, right? Base damage 45, right? So if each arrow does 9 damage, you're going to have 2 enemies on the side. Each shot will have 9 damage. So it's going to go 9 to the left, 9 to the right, 9 to the left, 9 to the right. My understanding of this is that if there's one enemy, both of those arrows are going to hit the same enemy. So it'll do 18 damage every time. So it's going to double the damage if there's a single enemy there. I really enjoy using this one because, like I said, it's just so straightforward, right? It's just so, it's like the meat and potatoes of your turrets. And I'm going to put this up in the usually category because there are some other ones that I tend to lean towards a little bit more, but 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times, if I see this, I'm not going to turn it down if I'm looking for a turret. And like most other turrets, you can get some great affixes on this thing. You can get Poison Cloud around the trap. You can get enemies burn when they die. Shots leave a trail of flames. Pierce all. Trap just, what is it? Like when the trap is destroyed, it covers the ground with burning oil. There's a lot of really good affixes you can get as you start to dig in here. But again, this is straightforward, run-of-the-mill trap that's really, really got some good utility to it. Up next is the Sinew Slicer. So this was tactics only. I can't remember if I mentioned that. Sinew Slicer is tactics and brutality. And this is really interesting because it used to just be straight up tactics. And then I think it was in 1.9 during the update of Plenty. I'm pretty sure that's when it changed from tactics only. Maybe it was 2.1. There we go. So it changed in 2.1 from tactics to brutality tactics. And the reason for that is because part of the whole build kind of flattening or streamlining was that they kind of wanted to have certain colors or certain builds have certain things. So bleed is primarily a brutality thing, right? There is crossover, obviously. Sinew Slicer has tactics, throwing knives, knife dance, etc. But their goal was to have brutality be like the bleeding thing. So they added this as a brutality turret, and I feel like that really opens the door up as far as like build versatility. And of course, you're like DG, of course it does, because now you can have 2 colors instead of 1. Like, obviously that's part of it. But you can take this with the tactics build, and as far as turrets go, you can throw it down and use it at a distance to take enemies out. Like I mentioned, from the double Crossb-o-matic, you can be a platform above, drop it down and take enemies out. You can pair it with support to get extra damage from it. If you're taking tactics. If you're taking brutality, you can toss this down and then rush up to an enemy with the blood sword and start attacking the enemy with that. What will happen is that the bleeding from the Sinew Slicer and the bleeding from the blood sword, it's the same, right? It's the same status effect. And what happens is that, just like, and I think I might have mentioned this before, just like the FromSoft games, right? Go back to Dark Souls, Bloodborne. The way that bleed works in Dead Cells now is that it stacks and then it pops. So what you want to do is you want to get as much bleed on the enemy as possible, so that way when it hits 5 blood stacks, it'll pop, it'll do more damage, and then you can start over again. This thing fires fairly quickly. Does it say? Bursts are fired twice a second, 3-shot bursts with 0.1 seconds between. So what that means is that every second you're getting 6 shots fired out. You get 6 blades coming out of this thing. So right there, that's gonna set you up to get that bleeding pop pretty easily. Pair it with something else, and I know I was just talking about brutality, but yeah, pair this with something else. Pair it with Cleaver. Throw them both down and just watch the entire level just get covered in blood. Pair it with throwing knives. Pair it with whatever, So this is it's really straightforward what it does. All it does is it just shoots blades that inflict bleeding, but like it can be really powerful. And what's another great thing about this is that this is one of the items that's unlocked at the very beginning of the game. So no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you're going to find a Sinew Slicer for free at some point. I take this usually, and similar to what I was saying about double Crossb-o-matic, you can get tons of great affixes on this thing. You can get bleeding propagation. I think that's the legendary affix, right? Yeah, so you can get, if you get a legendary one, bleeding will spread to all the other enemies, but I think you can also just get that as a regular start affix. If you get the Toxic Cloud on this thing, we're talking immediate application of 2 different status effects, poison and bleed, right off the bat. So there's a lot of utility here, and it's, like I said, it's a little bit less straightforward than the double Crossb-o-matic, but still, it does one thing really well. And like I was saying, you get a variety of different ways that you can use this depending on what color you take it with. So, Sinew Slicer. There it is. Up next is Wolf Trap. So Wolf Trap is also one of the traps that is unlocked by default. So I think Sinew Slicer and Wolf Trap are the only two you get for free. They are. Yep. So Wolf Trap is a tactics and survival split trap, and what it does is that it will ensnare an enemy for I think it's like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Yeah. So it launches 2 traps. It'll root an enemy for 5 seconds, and it increases the damage that they take by a base of 34 DPS. So does it have the calculations here? It doesn't. As your stats go up, just like everything, right? Everything that's within a certain color, as your stats go up, the increase in DPS is going to go up as well. So technically, you could just grab this off color if you're trying to root an enemy. If you grab it on brutality, but you know this will double skill with tactics and survival here. Rooting is really interesting, and we're going to go into some of the other status effects as we get further down here. But rooting's really interesting because it doesn't always force the enemy to stay facing the same direction. So if you were to stun an enemy, right? If you were to use the stun grenade, hit an enemy with it, and it's facing towards the left of the screen, you can roll through it, and the enemy will still be stunned, and it will still be facing the left side. Rooting does not stop an enemy from attacking. So what can happen is that you can throw a wolf trap down, you can throw a root grenade down, and there's a chance that the enemy can turn around. So in that example I just gave you, if the enemy is looking to the left, if you roll through it going towards the right, there's a chance that it could go to the right and then attack you. Take a wolf trap into the promenade and trap the runners, one of the guys that teleports everywhere. Trap a runner and then go behind it and see what happens. Rooting is like good though, right? Because I think the affix you can get on it is plus 75% to a rooted target, which is good, right? So bleed is 60, poison's 80, burning's 40, root is 75. So that's chunky. So if you have something that has plus 75% to rooted, especially if it's on something like a baseball bat or a nutcracker or Maw of the Deep, things that will crit or have higher DPS because of something that's rooted, that damage can pile up pretty quickly. It's also a really good, the word that just came to mind is mousetrap, and that's horrible, but like it's like a really good buffer to just stop an enemy from coming at you. So if you're going down a corridor, you're coming down a corridor here, and then, you know, here's an enemy, and the enemy's coming towards you, you can drop the wolf trap, keep moving, and the enemy's going to get stuck in it, and it's not going to be able to continue past, right? So that's like a really good way to just kind of like give yourself some breathing room, especially if you're taking this with tactics, so that way you can continue to be further away and then use tactics items that are built for range, like most of them, right? Throw a wolf trap down, maybe throw another trap down right next to it, and then go far away and hit them with Nerves of Steel or multi-nox bow, or, you know, whatever it is, marksman bow, even better. So it's a nice way to pause things. It's a nice way to get extra DPS. It's, like I said, it's for free. You know, one of the original builds that you can do right from a fresh save file is take wolf trap, take nutcracker, and there you go, right? Every enemy you root, you're going to get huge crits on it. Not every enemy can be rooted though. I don't remember. Let me see. I don't want to start digging through the wiki, but not every enemy can be rooted, and bosses do have diminishing returns, right? So some won't be rooted, some will get stuck, but over time, the more that you use it, the less effective it's going to be. You know, Scarecrow and Queen come to mind as far as enemies that are susceptible to wolf trap. So like I said, it's a good buffer. It's a good way to increase DPS. It's a good way to get some rooted synergies, and like the other ones. And I don't want to say this with every trap, but basically, you know, you can also get some great affixes on it, right? So just assume, I'm not going to repeat that every time because it's true. All of these can get affixes. I don't know about emergency decoy, but most of these can get affixes like I was mentioning. Toxic Cloud around the trap, you know, covers the ground with burning oil when destroyed, etc. So I also find that traps are an easy way to get synergy and an easy way to pump up damage. I don't take this all the time, but I take it sometimes, for all the reasons that I mentioned. And, you know, sometimes it's actually cool. It's kind of cool to get this off color sometimes too, right? Because if you trap an enemy with like a brutality build and you have something like the Panchaku in combo, you're adding additional DPS on top of the DPS that you're already ramping up. So it's like a unique situation. But when you take this thing on color, yeah, you're gonna get some nice utility out of it. All right, heavy turret. So heavy turret is, the way that I would describe this, it's like a one-directional, chunky version of your double Crossb-o-matic. So this is a rare blueprint. It's dropped by the Slashers, who are the Skeletor looking, there you go, from the Ossuary, Prison Depths, etc. It's a rare blueprint, and the way that it works is basically you toss it down and it will, like once every 0.8 seconds or something like that. Yep, there you go. Once every 0.8 seconds, it will allow you to get a buff, but that's also how long the enemies get stunned. It's really interesting that this is only tactics. I feel like because of the slowness of it, because of the stun ability that the projectiles have, the fact that you get extra damage when you're close to it, you immediately get a damage buff. So, you know, if you pair this with support, you're going to get 60, 70, whatever the total percentage is. I really find it interesting that this isn't split tactics survival, because I feel like this would also be a nice chunky thing for survival to have. And granted, as we'll get to it, it's almost like survival got its own, you know, bootleg heavy turret with the Queen and the CDLC. But I feel like the regular heavy turret should be dual scaling, but I guess that's beside the point. It's interesting because, like, you can get some really heavy chunky hits out of this thing. Like I mentioned, you can get some extra damage when you're close to it, so you can kind of set up your build so that way you're maximizing all of your damage bonuses based on the proximity to the turret. But it's a little tricky because the stun will interrupt enemies, especially bosses. It will interrupt enemies' attacks, and it might throw you off. So if you take this, the perfect example is if you take this into the Concierge, he might just be getting ready to jump, and then if the heavy turret hits him, it will like interrupt the attack. So you might be preparing for the jump, and then you stop, and he gets stunned for this 0.8 seconds, and then he slams down and throws the fire on the ground, and you weren't expecting it. So it's a little tricky for bosses. I don't really recommend taking it into boss fights, but in general, like I said, it does some good damage. The legendary will pierce everything, so that way if you have 5, 6, 4, whatever enemies in a row, it will go through all of them. Legendary is super powerful. But yeah, so it's like I said, it's just a chunky kind of like middle of the road, single shot. If this is a double Crossb-o-matic, this is a single chunk-o-matic. Let's call it that. I take it sometimes. I do prefer to take the quicker, lighter ones, but in biomes, this thing can do some work. And like I said, especially if you're close to it, and you want to start stacking some damage there. You're gonna do some good work with this thing. And now, we're gonna do some elemental stuff too. Okay, so Flamethrower Turret. This is a tactics and brutality scaling turret that shoots flames. I think the cooldown on this is like, okay, so the base cooldown is 12 seconds. I think I'm not kidding. It used to be like 6. I swear, this used to be like 6. Yeah, here we go. You used to have a turret with 6-second cooldown, which is absurd, especially if you have, if you took this with either Hunter's Instinct or Killer Instinct for tactics or brutality cooldown respectively. You can throw a turret down, kill a couple enemies, and then 6 seconds later throw it down again. Like that's that's wild. It's wild. You can see that I got a little bit of a nerf too, just because of how strong it was. But this is another. This is like a, you know, I feel like with a lot of these turrets, they're just like very good utility. I really do. So I take Flamethrower Turret very often, and not only are you getting that compatibility with two different colors, right? You're getting your brutality and you're getting your tactics with it. You have the opportunity to get those synergies. You have the opportunity to get Toxic Cloud, etc. I know I said I wasn't just going to talk about it, but it's something that comes built in with these things. The 12-second cooldown isn't like that huge of a deal. I think the other cooldowns, I think Sinew Slicer is 10. Yeah, so Sinew Slicer, double Crossb-o-matic, and Heavy Turret are all 10 seconds. So it's I guess it's negligible. You know, it's not that huge of a difference, but I really enjoy this thing. I love throwing this thing down in front of a slow enemy, in front of a slow boss. You know, like I know I just picking on the Concierge here, but throwing it in front of Concierge, and as he's lumbering towards you, just taking a ton of fire damage, you know, just eating it up. This can also get the affix where it spreads oil, so you can immediately throw this thing down, get burning oil on the ground, and if your weapon or another item has 100% to burning oil, your damage is going to double just like that. You press one button and you get double damage on that item. Because this is it's technically a fire item, that cannot get that damage bonus. Like it can't get burning oil, 100% to burning oil. So Flamethrower Turret. Let's see, what's the other one? Fire Grenade, and Holy Water. Like, because those are considered quote unquote fire items, it's not gonna ever be able to get 100% on burning oil for damage. That's also why you don't see it on things like the Torch. You do see it sometimes on the Oiled Sword, because the Oiled Sword is not qualified as a fire weapon or a fire item, so it can get 100% to burning oil, which is an affix. If you're going Oiled Sword, like, always re-roll for that thing. It's not super hard to get, considering that enemies will burn when they die, and you're spreading oil with the sword. You can get it pretty easily, but I digress. I take this thing very often. I think it's one of the strongest turrets, in my opinion. I would say there's only two other turrets that will either outclass, one definitely outclasses it, and one matches it. But yeah, this is a workhorse, and I feel like it can fit in just about any build. Next up, we're gonna go with Cleaver. And Cleaver, I think it used to be called like the meat. I think it used to be called either Meat Cleaver or like the Meat Machine or something like that. Does it tell you what it was? Yeah, the Meat Grinder. There we go. So back in the day, this thing used to be called the Meat Grinder, which is so funny. So what this does is you throw down the Cleaver, and it has like a bunch of little meat grinders on the ground. It'll like slow the enemy up a little bit, and it will inflict bleeding. So it does damage, and it does it quick, right? So let's see, 2 ticks per second. So every 3 seconds you're gonna get a pop out of this. And if you have something else that, like I was mentioning with the Blood Sword earlier, if you have throwing knives, you have Blood Sword, you throw down a Sinew Slicer next to it, that bleeding is gonna stack and pop even quicker. I use this thing all the time. I take it all the time. If I see it off color, I will take it. I won't, unless there's a very specific build that I'm in, I will take it. This also, it's interesting. So the Sinew Slicer used to just be tactics only, and then they split it into tactics and brutality. Cleaver used to be tactics and brutality, and now it's only brutality. So now it's only a red skill. So, you know, I've spent most of my time playing 1.8 or earlier. You know, if you if you count up the thousands of hours, I've probably spent more time on the older versions. And it's interesting to not have this be tactics, because I feel like I mentioned earlier, brutality kind of is the bleeding thing, but I feel like this would, maybe it would be too overpowered, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe they wanted to, you know, if you pair this thing with support tactics, like, you know, see you later. But either way, I use this thing very often. I'm attached to it. One of the things I like about it, it has like a cool like gear grinding kind of noise when it's on the ground. If you leave this out during the final boss, the final 5BC boss, if that item is on the ground at the end of that fight, you will continue to hear the noise. And I think it might happen during the Queen too. You'll continue to hear the noise as the as the credits roll, which I think is really funny. So in case you couldn't tell, this thing is something that's a part of my kit very often on Brutality, and almost every single time I see it, legendary or out of a cursed chest when it's colorless. Barnacle. So Barnacle is a turret that attaches to a ceiling or a platform, or you can let it go and it will kind of float in the air and hang from balloons. And what it does is it will shoot little bullets out, at diagonal angles towards the enemies that are underneath it. This thing used to just be okay, right? It would be fine, but now what it does is that they buffed it so that way it crits on poisoned enemies. So if you find that poison cloud affix on the Barnacle, you're immediately getting you're immediately going to get the crits off of this, and you could also get plus 80. Is it 80? Yeah, plus 80% to poison on this thing too, so you can get additional damage right off the bat. Super sick. If you don't have a way to apply poison, this turret, to me, it just feels a little underwhelming, especially, if you just look at the top two. If you look at the top two lines here, just right off the bat, it just feels a little underwhelming to me when there are other options. For me, like, I don't take this often. I can't, if I put it up here, I feel like that's not true. That's not true to my playing style. I don't take it that often unless I get the Toxic Cloud, unless I have something that applies poison, and I also can get plus 80 on poison. Just because, like I said, if I'm playing purple, since this is a purple only, it's tactics only. If I'm going tactics only, there are other things that I'm gonna want to take that are going to allow me to get higher damage, get enemies off the screen quicker, get status effects, right? So right off the bat, 1, 2, 3, 4 of these off the bat have their own status, right? Always bleed, always fire, always bleed, always root. This doesn't. So for me personally, I just think that there's better options out there, especially because there are so many things in tactics that are, I don't know if imbalance is the right word, but there are some items that are just super powerful. And unfortunately, in my opinion, I don't think Barnacle is one of them. Here's Crusher. Crusher used to be something that was never worth taking. Not never. It was. If this was back a while ago, it would be rarely, because what it would do is that it would just, any enemy that kind of walked over its field of affect, it would just do a big bunch of damage to the enemy, and it would be hard, right? It'd be hard to get an enemy to stop in that area long enough while you're close enough to the trap to trigger it for them to actually take the damage, right? If you threw like the wolf trap down next to it, you might have some better luck, but on its own, it wasn't anything special until they buffed it. And again, I think this might have been 1.9 or 2.1. Yep. So in 1.9, it now slows enemies within the range within its attack range, which is great, because now you're not only going to get the extra slow, like you're not only going to get the enemy in the range of the trap for it to take effect, but you're also applying another status. And statuses are super important in Dead Cells. They're important to get your DPS up. They're important to debuff enemies. They're important to they all help kind of like swing the scales or turn the tables in your favor. With this, you can also take Frostbite. So not only is the enemy being slowed down, but with the colorless mutation Frostbite right now, enemies take damage when they're slowed based on how many ticks of slow they have on it. So this thing has a lot of potential. I don't take it all the time. I do take it sometimes, and I feel like in certain builds, oh my god, like I just said, you can pair this thing with Frostbite, pair it with Heart of Ice, which is the mutation that provides cooldown when you hit a slowed, rooted, frozen, or stunned enemy. You can get some cooldown pretty quick. It only hits enemies 2 or 3. Let's see, I think it's 3 times. Yeah. So the Crusher only does the big hit of damage 3 times. Cooldown's what? 14 seconds? Is that what it is? Yeah. Cooldown. So the cooldown's not that bad. But I feel like you're going to throw this thing down, enemies are going to get trapped, and then they're just going to disappear. Like, that's it. They're just going to disappear, the enemies. And it's great when you have more than one enemy moving their way towards you, and then they hit Crusher, and like, you know it's going to happen. Like, you see the effect from the ground of like the thing charging up, and you know that it's going to do like a huge burst of damage on those enemies. Like, it's really cool to see. But yeah, I take it sometimes. This is another thing I don't take into boss fights. I don't love certain types of crowd control over bosses, just because it changes attack timing, it changes parry windows, it changes dodge windows. But for me in biomes, like, yeah, I'll take this sometimes for sure. So here is the I just noticed this thing only has 2 teeth. Here is the one-eyed, 2-toothed, one-tongue explosive decoy. So this thing it kind of looks like, it looks a little bit like the protectors that you'll see in the promenade, in the corrupted prison, and some other levels. Basically what you do is you throw the trap down and it turns you invisible. So it'll turn you invisible for 13 seconds and it will have enemies nearby attack it. So best case scenario, or best usage scenario, think about, you're being followed by 3 malaise hungry enemies on 5 BC. You can throw this thing down. As you're running away, you become invisible, and then the enemies will get stuck attacking the turret instead of attacking you. After it takes a certain amount of damage, I think it's also damage too. I could have sworn that if it... 2.5. I could have sworn that after it takes a certain amount of damage, it will blow up, but it seems like it's only time based, or if you trigger it again. And what we'll do is it'll almost like turn into a cluster grenade. So when the trap explodes, it will shoot out a bunch of grenades, does a little bit of damage, and that's it. Cooldown's 20 seconds. I feel like that's a little high, just in general, based on the amount of utility you get out of this thing, because for me, I feel like the phrase that I'm thinking of is playing to lose. You're not going to take this trap for damage, right? You're using this because you're in a situation where you need to get out. So instead of leaning into something that's going to be upping your damage or buffing your damage, you're leaning into something that's going to not do minimal damage, but also just remove you from a situation where, in those situations, if you had items that did more damage, there's a chance that you wouldn't need it. Kind of like a weird catch-22. But the phrase playing to lose, it's something that my friend Bag says, and it's basically like, and I'll talk about this a lot more when you go through the mutations tier list, because I feel like a lot of survival mutations are that way. But in a game where it's so important to have high DPS, and it's so important to erase enemies from the map as quickly as possible, I feel like this is just more of a panic button. I personally rarely take this. When there were items on scrolls many updates ago, I would take this on tactics if I saw it, because I'd get 2 purple scrolls from it. But as is, again, especially compared to how top heavy this stuff is and how much damage you can get out of other things, like, I don't take it that often. And by often, I mean I hardly ever take it. I do take it out of the tubes if it's there because I kind of have no choice. But that's pretty much it. Hot topic. E-door. Emergency door. In the first collaboration video that Modesto and I did, we got a legendary door. And I say we. All I did was talk. He played. So Modesto got a legendary door in the sewers, the toxic sewers, and we kind of joked about it, and he kept it all the way to the end. We made a bunch of jokes about it because the door is not something that people might lean towards. It is a joke, but I don't look down on this thing, right? Any jokes I make about it they're in good fun, right? It's out of it's out of love. The way that the door works is you throw it down, and it's this purple door that functions just like a wooden door. Enemies generally won't go through it. You can roll through it to break it. You can stand on one side of it to protect you from an enemy. But like all these other traps, you can get great affixes on it. Super quick way to get poison, super quick way to get burning oil. And I think the cooldown is 10 seconds on this. What are we looking at? Yeah, so it's a 10-second cooldown. So if you have this every 10 seconds, you can get burning oil. Every 10 seconds, you can do whatever. Also gives you a little bit of damage reduction too. I think it goes up to 10 or 11% on higher scroll counts, which is helpful with tactics. The other thing, and the most important thing, is that this item synergizes super well with the crowbar. And as I'm talking about this, I'm remembering that I just had I meant to write their username down so I could call them out specifically. I'll put it in the comments. I recently just had a interaction with a viewer who commented about emergency door, thinking that during my blueprints video, thinking that it was I made it like I was making a joke, and he's like, they were like, I thought that it was you were talking about it being OP because it synergizes with the crowbar, which is something that it does. And you know what? Hold on. All right. I'm just gonna go to the video. I don't care. How meta is this? You're watching a YouTube video about me looking at a YouTube video. Let's see who this person is. Here we go. So their username, which is off screen. Here we go. Garrulus8750. At first, I thought you were serious about the emergency door because of crowbar synergy, and I actually said that I was going to make a trap tier list down the line and give the door its due. And that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm doing. So, this gets a bad rap. I like it. I like it, and I take it sometimes. Again, decent way to get affixes. I understand that there's a joke around it. I know it's a meme item, etc., etc. If you take this with crowbar, you can break this door to get, I think the crowbar crits up to 15 seconds, maybe. I think it's a 15-second crit condition, so you will constantly be critting with the crowbar. You get synergies, you throw it down with the poison cloud affix, you break it, you have a crowbar that has 80% to poison, and then there you go. That's it. You're going to get sick crits, and you're going to get good damage from the additional affixes. So I am not ashamed. And I think it was even might have been in my face flask video where I made a joke about defending emergency door to the death. And here I am. I use it sometimes. Come at me. Leave comments. We'll talk about it respectfully, and I will agree with your opinion because there's no right or wrong. Oh, God. All right. Up next is Tesla Coil. I talked about Tesla Coil in my Derelict Distillery video, and I mentioned how there are items and then there's the Tesla Coil. And this thing has been nerfed twice. The shock damage has been nerfed. The base damage has been nerfed. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They could nerf this thing even more and it would still be, and this is, I know I'm not, again, not best, but objectively speaking, this turret has the highest damage output potential of all the other turrets, and because of its range, right? So when you throw this thing down, it's not just on the ground like the Cleaver, and it's not shooting from side to side like the Flamethrower Turret or the Sinew Slicer. The range, it has like an arc to it where the shock damage will hit multiple enemies at once and it will go in all different directions. And like the perfect example of this is like the giant. So if you were to take this into the giant fight, you'll throw it down right in the middle of the fight underneath the giant's head. It will hit both hands, and then as soon as one of the hands runs out of health, the eye's going to pop out, and then it's immediately going to hit the eye. And that's it. You just leave it right in the middle of the arena. The reach on this thing's insane. The damage is insane. You know, for the 100th time, the affixes you can get on this thing are insane. So I take this all the time. I take it all the time. Not ashamed. It's like such a powerhouse. It's such a workhorse, and it's almost like, I almost feel like the Tesla Coil is already just like a legendary item on its own, but it's not. It's just something you can get from the distillery, from the living barrels. It's a 10% drop, so it's not super hard to get, but you do have to go into the distillery to pull it up. But man, this thing does a lot of damage. So if you haven't gotten it, get it. If you haven't seen my Derelict Distillery video and you're curious, I'll put a link in the description just so that way you can learn a little bit more about the biome. I feel like it gets a really bad rap. I do like it a lot, actually. But if anything, I think I ended that script saying, like, you know, I don't blame you if you just go into the Derelict Distillery once to get the Tesla Coil and never go back. And if that's what you do, that's what you do. But this is a must-have in any player's item pool. And if you don't have it, I strongly recommend that you take the time to grab that blueprint, just because of how silly it can be. So here we have the Scavenged Bombard, and this is like it's interesting because this is to my knowledge, this is the only DLC item that drops from a non-DLC enemy. So you need this, you need the Queen and the Sea DLC in order to use this thing. And it drops from the pirate captains in Stilt Village. It's just like a regular drop. I think it's like, what is it, a 1.7? What are we looking at? Yeah, so it's just a regular drop. 1.7, and this is dual scaling, so it does scale with both tactics and survival, which was kind of like what I was talking about with heavy turret earlier. It's basically like you are the pirate, right? So all of those fast, heavy cannonballs that they shoot at you, you now can stand next to a turret that will shoot a cannonball at the enemies. So you get regular damage from it, you get splash damage, so you get a little bit of AoE. And just like the heavy turret, you get 0.8 seconds of stun. When you're close to it, you get a plus 15% damage buff. Here we go, right? Boom. Functions similarly to heavy turret. So the issue that I have with this, so this is, you know, people are just never happy, right? I'm falling into that trap of saying, if only the heavy turret or survival. And then I'm right here, I'm going to say, if only the Scavenged Bombard had a longer activation range. But you know what? It doesn't. It does big splash damage. You get your damage buff from it. It will stun enemies, but you need to be close to it. And if you aren't close to it, it's not going to work, right? Radical acceptance. So radically accepting what the Scavenged Bombard does. I don't take it that often. I feel I'm struggling here with this because truthfully, I do not take it that often. Oops, sorry about that. Generally, when I have survival builds, there are other things that I'll fill the skill slot with. but I complained about heavy turret not being survival. So here I am, trapped in a maze of my own building, where I'm realizing that I asked for something, I got something that is similar to what I asked, and I don't take it that often. So let this not be a lesson on turrets or dead cells or survival versus tactics. Let this be a lesson on the human condition. Sometimes things are just what they are. And sometimes you have something right under your nose that might line up with something that you're thinking about, and you just continually recycle it. You continually restock when you're in a shop. You ignore it when it's in a double item altar. So this is not about the Scavenged Bombard. This is about me. This is about this is about my dissatisfaction and not being satisfied that I have a way to ease my dissatisfaction. All that said, just like the heavy turret, it is chunky. You are going to get the extra damage when you're near it, and you can be like the pirate captain. You get some splash damage, you throw some cannonballs out, do some work. Don't be like me. Give it a shot. Give it more of a shot. And as I'm talking, oh man, there was another comment on one of my videos. One of my tier lists, might have been on the Melee tier list, and I can't remember this person's name because it was like 3 or 4 months ago, but they had mentioned that it would be cool to see a run with all of the things that I ranked kind of low, right? So just doing a custom mode with only the stuff that was in not often and rarely, like across my tier list. And like, that's something that I've toyed with. I can't do that yet because the tier lists aren't done. But like, even just looking at this, like I'm seeing that I need to give this more of a chance. And you know what? I might give it a chance and be like, I didn't really even need this. I said I wanted it, and now that I have it and I'm using it, I don't need it. But this is something I'm going to give more of a shot. So let's bring it back. Let's step away from the pop psychology and the existential introspection, and let's get back to the tier list. So phase 2, we're going to do grenades. Grenades, I feel like, are going to be a little bit more straightforward because there's less variables involved with them compared to the traps. But we're gonna rock and roll. And just like some of the other ones, we're gonna start with the items that are available early, regular stuff, and then there's only one DLC grenade, and this is so wild. So I think I mentioned this in my shields video too. Grenades had like nothing for 24 main updates, right? So when 1.0 came out, all of these grenades, so from ice grenade all the way down to stun grenade, all of these were in the game. Yeah, they may have been different colors or whatever, but like they were all in the game. The only time that we've gotten an additional grenade after initial release, which was 2018, right? August 2018. So we're talking almost, oh my God, this game's been out for a long time. What is this? Almost 6 years, right? One extra grenade. I find that really interesting. And the same thing happened with the shields. There was one shield that was introduced in 1.2. And then I think there was one shield that was introduced in 3.3, Return to Castlevania. So either way, for a long time, we did not have any changes to grenades. And then Holy Water came in. So just a little bit of an aside. But now we have, is there 11 grenades now? Yeah, we had 11 grenades. So first up is one of my favorites, and it is not the most powerful. It's not the most powerful grenade. It has a long cooldown, but personally, I take ice grenade all the time. I take it a lot. You know, I have a strong affinity for this item based on its history, based on how often I've used it. It used to be red. It used to be brutality and tactics. So think about that. If you ever want to think about how much Dead Cells has changed over the past 6 years or whatever it is, Ice Grenade, which is now survival only, used to dual scale with tactics in Brutality. So this game has gone through some growing pains. It's gone through a lot of changes, but as is right now, I think the Ice Grenade has a 13 or 16 second. Oh my God, 18 seconds. So I overlooked that. I thought it was 16. So it's got almost 20-second cooldown. It's got an 18-second cooldown. I just really like this thing. It has a strong or a large area of effect where it will freeze enemies. You can generally take out most bats. Like you can take a bunch of kamikazes out with this. It's a great way to just stop enemies in their traps, kind of like similar to what I said with Wolf Trap. But it has, like I said, it has like a bigger area of effect. There's a lot of really cool affixes you can get with this thing too, right? So you can get, Thaw. It's like Thaw spreads to nearby enemies. Enemies bleed after thawing. You can pair this with Frostbite, that mutation that does damage for every tick of slow that an enemy has. And if you get slow propagation with this, you can start clearing out some bats and doing extra damage, pretty easily. And I know that, yeah, this is one of the first items that you'll probably see in the game, and you can take it any color. I think it doesn't do a lot of damage. I don't even know what the actual DPS is. Yeah, there's 35. So you're not getting into this for any sort of damage, but it's more just freeze application, affix propagation, etc. But yeah, I take this thing a lot, and I like it. I feel like I was just going to say something else about it. Oh, yeah. You can take this off color. So what it does is I believe it mitigates damage. So there are some items, like I mentioned, the emergency door, I think stun grenade, ice armor, smoke bomb. Well, actually, I don't know. I think smoke bomb too, but there are some items that will provide damage reduction instead of damage increase as the scrolls go up. So you can take this with any build. Take it off color. The only thing you're really going to be missing is the amount of damage reduction. So I think base is like maybe 2 or 3. If you're playing a normal run and you're doing brutality or tactics, you'll probably finish the game with 5 or 6 stats in survival. So you'll get 5 or 6% damage reduction instead of 10 or 11 or whatever it is. But you can take this anywhere. I do take this anywhere. I really enjoy it. And again, super basic. These are the Uggs. The Ice Grenade is the Uggs of grenades, and I just put them on and I kick back and I get cozy. The other unlocked grenade by default is the Infantry Grenade. So this is brutality only. It's just like a little pop. It's just like a small little mini burst of damage. It has a 4-second cooldown, so you can use it pretty quickly. You can pair it with if you have Killer Instinct, that will provides cooldown with every melee kill. You can throw this at an enemy, kill something with one of your melee items, and then it's immediately gonna be ready for use. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't do a lot of damage, and I feel like if you do the damage calculation between that and the powerful grenade, I feel like it's almost like the Infantry Grenade does more, right? So if you look at your base damage, so 90 damage every 4 seconds. Powerful Grenade is 200 damage every 13 seconds. So if you were to roughly, 13 seconds is roughly 3 times here. You're going to get 270 damage for the powerful grenades, 200 damage, but the difference is instead of getting 1 burst of 200, you're getting 3 bursts of 90 within that same time period. Or the same cooldown period, I should say. So clearly, that's the weakness of this item, is that it just doesn't do a lot of damage, but that's the point, right? That's the point of this thing. It's supposed to be just like a little, like I said at the beginning, just like a little pop, do a little bit of damage, move on. I take this thing sometimes. I feel like it's a great placeholder. If you're looking for something else, I mean, as you'll notice, there'll be other grenades that I do take more often. But just in general, it's a nice little placeholder. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's great. I think it's just something it'll do its job. If you are looking for a low damage grenade with an insanely small cooldown, then here you go. that's your thing. There it is. Up next is the powerful grenade. So I just talked about it briefly. So it is the it is the big sibling of the infantry grenade. All it does is a large explosion. Like I mentioned, it does a bigger burst of damage with the higher cooldown. It does dual scale, so you can grab the Sun Brutality or you can grab it on survival. It's sort of like the ice grenade. You know, I have a lot of history with this, just because it's been something that I've had in my kits for a long time. I don't always take it, but I do usually take it. And I feel like this is something that is just really, it's like a really well-rounded secondary support item, right? So think of your brutality build. Let's say you have Cleaver as one skill and then powerful grenade as the second skill. You're getting your bleed, you're getting your support, you're getting whatever it is out of this from the trap. You have your regular items, and this is something that you can use to either finish an enemy off or clear other enemies out as you're approaching a group. Similar to what I said about ice grenade, but this is obviously way more damaging. This can clear out a bunch of small enemies. Like, take this thing into the underground prom or ramparts or toxic sewers with all the rats, and because of the size of its area of effect, like, you're gonna do some pretty good damage. I take this thing fairly frequently. Again, I feel like it's not something I build around, where, like, yeah, if I get a turret with like a good affix, or if I'm feeling really strongly about a certain item, I'll build around it. This is something that I put on top. You know, these are the powerful grenade is like the explosive huge strawberries that you'll put on top of a cheesecake. It's not the cheesecake, but damn, like, that adds something, you know? I feel like my analogies are I feel like everyone's getting insight to a different part of my personality that I haven't really put in my videos yet. But that's cool. Like I said, what are we doing here? Single take, no script. I think I said earlier, like, who knows what, I don't even know what I'm going to say. And clearly, as the video's gone on, that's what's been going on. All right. Let's do these. So we get 8 more. I think I'm not going to do the powers here. I am just going to do the traps and grenades, and then I'll record the powers one. You know what I might do? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do one video, but I'm going to record each section separately. The reason why I'm not going to go through all the powers is because I'm feeling loopy. And I feel like the longer this video goes on, the more esoteric and the more totally out there my descriptions are going to go. Like, I'm going to be talking about Wings of the Crow, and we're going to be talking about time travel and like parallel dimensions. I'm going to get to Giant Whistle, and I'm going to be like, yo, aliens don't come from outer space. They come from inside the Earth. Spaceships come out of volcanoes. We don't want to go there. We don't want to go there, but I think that's a good idea. I'll record this in 2, even though I said 1 take. It'll be 1 take for the traps and grenades and 1 take for the powers, and I'll just make this all one video, so that way people don't have to click 2 different videos and you can just skip around. So, all right. Thank you for talking that out with me. I feel pretty good about this. So next up is the fire grenade. I feel like you're going to get exactly what you think out of this. It's a brutality only grenade. You throw it and it spreads fire. I don't think, yeah, so the fire damage, so we're getting 25 DPS. What's the fire damage on Flamethrower Turret? Oh, it's actually less, but I think it applies more often. It does what it says on the box, right? You pick it up, you look at the back, and it's like, hey, if you want a middle of the road grenade that does some decent fire damage and has like a cooldown that's not super long, grab it. And I say, all right. I take it sometimes. I think it pairs really well with the oil grenade, which we'll talk next about. But yeah, there's just not like a ton. There's not a ton to say about this. I think it's a great utility, great secondary. It's a great way to apply fire. It's a great way to get burning oil if you pair it with something that spreads oil. And it's a nice way to kind of like do a little bit of chunk damage as you're doing other things. Obviously, clearly, great way to get the plus 40% on burning. Take it with Vampire Killer to get crits. Take it with the Oiled Sword to get crits. You know, pick your, pick your poison, pick your fire, and do that. But yeah, straight middle of the road. Oil Grenade is it's interesting. So what's the DPS on this compared to... Okay, so it's basically half the power of a powerful grenade. But the key difference here is that it scales with tactics as well. So if you're thinking... Actually, Fire Blast and Pyrotechnics both scale with Brutality now too, so that really doesn't matter. But if you're looking for something that does a quick pop on tactics, right? So looking here... Yeah, I mean, you get it with Knife Dance, but a lot, and maybe Lacerating Aura, but Oil Grenade's a nice way to just apply oil and get some decent damage quick. I do tend to pair these two together. I'll take Oil Grenade and Fire Grenade at the same time. And I do tend to take this on tactics sometimes if I'm just looking for something to fill a slot, right? So if I already have a Tesla coil and I'm flying through the game and I see one of these come out of a chest or something, I might just grab it. Just grab it and fit it into the slot, because I think this is also tactics. This is also tactics. This is the only tactics grenade that I take frequently enough for it to feel like it's kind of a treat, you know? Popping it up here. That's it. We're looking at just like a nice little pop of damage. You get your oil. Again, pair it with Fire Grenade. Get your burning oil. Pair it with Flamethrower Turret, get your burning oil, pair it with Pyrotechnics or Fire Blast to get your crits. And again, it's like a nice little pop. Again, the cooldown's not terrible. We're looking at, 10 seconds, which is shorter than the powerful grenade, but yeah. I use it sometimes. Dig it. I'm going to rearrange these a little bit. So up next is the cluster grenade. So I know I mentioned emergency decoy earlier. When it explodes, it sets out basically explodes into like a cluster grenade. So what the cluster grenade does, it has a huge cooldown. It's like 20 seconds. Yeah, 20 seconds. And what it does is it breaks into 6 bombs. So you throw the grenade down and then it spreads. I think like 3 to one side, 3 to the left side. It's a great way to cover a lot of ground, right? So if you have an enemy over here, you got an enemy over here, you got an enemy over here, you can throw that cluster grenade down and it will spread on both sides. I feel like this thing has, it takes its strengths in levels where there's a lot of smaller enemies, because instead of doing higher base damage, it does smaller base damage. Each bomb does 50 base. So if you're in the graveyard and there's an area where there's just a ton of rats, you throw the thing down, you're going to kill all of them instantly. Same thing with the toxic sewers. Same thing if you're in the sanctuary and there's a bunch of bats nearby, This thing does work like that. On the other side of that coin is, because the damage isn't super high and because it does spread out really wide, it doesn't really do well against just sort of like regular enemies. Like it obviously it does some damage and it'll chip away a little bit of health, but I feel like it's not strong enough to like take enemies out on their own, unless you're in an area where there's a pit, right? So say pick any level. The level generation has like an area like Prisoner's Quarters where you're going across a platform. You go down to a pit and then there's like any kind of enemy down there. Throwing the grenade down there and having it bounce off the walls will cluster. It will cluster the damage in a centralized, localized spot instead of having it spread out, because it's going to hit the walls. It has nowhere else to go. So that's a really cool use for it. So, you know, throwing it in small areas where enemies can't escape, throwing it in areas where there are enemies with low HP spread out, that's where this thing shines. Otherwise, it's not really that notable. They buffed it to scale with both brutality and survival. Used to just be brutality only. Again, this was probably 1924, can't remember. 21. Yep. The Malaise update. There it is. So in 2.1, they changed the scaling from single to double. So you can kind of fill it out, you know, like I was saying, the powerful grenade's like a huge explosive strawberry, you know, maybe the cluster grenade is like all the little chocolate chips that are sprinkled on top, you know. I do take it sometimes. I feel like I just mentioned, you know, levels where there's a bunch of little weak enemies, this thing rips. Take it somewhere where there's a lot of enemies that have higher HP, and it might not do that much work. It also, if you take it into a level where there's the Oven Axe enemies, the champions, I don't know if they're called Oven Knights or champions, I can't remember which is the old and which is the new, but the explosions from the cluster grenade will pop the enemy's shield, so be careful if you throw this down and you aggro one of those things, because they will immediately start running towards you, and those Oven Axes hit pretty hard. Next up, we have the Root Grenade. So Root Grenade, located in a, I should know this, I just did the video, located in a time door, 15-minute time door after the Concierge. So similar to what I said about Wolf Trap, the Root Grenade will root an enemy, but they'll still have the ability to turn around. I think the difference, though, is that Root Grenade will consistently, it consistently applies damage too. So the Wolf Trap will root an enemy and increase the damage. Root Grenade will root an enemy and also cause damage for 4 seconds. So this is a nice way to not only root enemies and keep them in place, but also just get a little bit of extra damage over time. I like to throw this down, similar to what I was saying about Cluster Grenade. If there's an area where there's like, you're up on a platform and there's a area below you where there's a bunch of enemies, I like to throw this down there, because again, it also has like a nice area of effect. And I kind of feel like, I don't know if this is true, so don't quote me on this, but I feel like Powerful Grenade, Ice Grenade, Fire Grenade, Oil Grenade, Root Grenade, I feel like they all have the same spread, like the size of the spread. I'm pointing at my monitors if you folks can see me. The size of the spread is the same. I like throwing this thing down, getting some extra damage on enemies, rooting them. It's good. The unfortunate thing about rooting is that, like I mentioned with the Wolf Trap, enemies can look in the opposite direction. So even though they might not move, if they're facing the left, they can turn around and face the right. I've taken many a hit expecting an enemy to stop where they are, and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna walk right up to this guy and slowly pull out my broadsword, and then I'm getting attacked. So you got to be careful with that. But a lot of utility. You know, take it. This is still the meta somehow, but you know, take it with Baseball Bat, Heart of Ice. Take it with the next grenade we're going to talk about. Take Baseball Bat with either of those, take it with both, and then game over, you know. I actually take Root Grenade a lot. Like I said, I appreciate the area of effect that it has. I appreciate its utility, and you know, bearing in mind that enemies can kind of shift in there a little bit, I find a lot of use out of this. Stun Grenade I take all the time. I really enjoy Stun Grenade because it does, unlike the Root Grenade, enemies can't move. And it's just like a really nice way to not only apply the status, but kind of like I mentioned with a couple other things, just pause enemies in their traps. It used to be, I think this also used to be like the Ice Grenade. I'm pretty sure this was also Tactics and Brutality, which to me is so funny. It's so funny how much things have changed. So yeah, so it went from Brutality Tactics to Brutality Tactics, Tactics Survival, and then from that to Survival, which is really funny. But this is another item that you can take off color. So you're not you know, it does a little bit of damage. You're not using this, just like the ice grenade, you're not using this to kill enemies. You're using this to apply a status. You're using this to stop enemies in their tracks. You're using this to go ham with the baseball bat, right? Take your pick, whatever it is. Damage doesn't matter. You can take this thing with any build, any color. It's going to do the same thing. So if you're looking for that stun, right? Like, let's say that you have a brutality baseball bat out of a curse chest and you want stun grenade, take it. Take stun grenade and take instinct and killer instinct to master the arms and killer instinct instead of heart of ice, and you're going to get your cooldown. Same thing goes with root grenade. You know, it does damage. It's, you know, it bases 50 DPS, but if you're just looking for that effect and you're just looking for stuff to get crits on rooted items with, you know, using their nutcracker or whatever, like, it's great. But yeah, I take stun grenade very often. This is something I lean on in a lot of my builds. I almost always have this in my kit when I'm going survival. I will almost always take it off color unless I have a build that, like, I'm really stoked about that does other things. And I like it, you know, and I think there's a difference here. So I mentioned, you know, playing to lose when we talked about explosive decoy. I don't think using stun grenade is playing to lose. I think of this as where you're going to drop and you're going to, you know, find a way out of the situation you're in. The stun grenade is a way for you to create an opportunity to go into a situation more safely. So I know I talked about baseball bat, but even taking that out of the equation, you know, you see a slasher and a spinner, or with the spinny guy, I can't remember what the lacerator. You see a slasher and a lacerator, the two tough enemies in the prison depths and in the ossuary. If you throw a stun grenade close to both of them, you're going to stun them both. So you're not going to get spun off a platform. You're not going to get rocked by the slasher's huge upward swing. You're going to create an opening that you can then use to go forward, engage, do damage, erase the enemy from the map, and then move on. So take this thing all the time. And I do think, like I mentioned earlier, this is one of the items that will provide damage reduction instead of a damage bonus, but I feel like it's negligible, especially if you take it on survival, where higher HP pool in general, you have other mutations like, you know, a lot of damage minimization, extra HP from soldiers resistance, etc. I feel like the damage reduction is negligible on this. Up next, we have Swarm. Personally, I do not like biters. I don't like biters because enemies will target them. So if you have biters out, you may be making your way through a level and an enemy is running up to you and you think it's going to attack you, and it attacks the biters. And instead of what you go to do something and you roll directly into the enemy's attack because it stops. The Inquisitors will shoot their lasers or their magic spells at biters, all that stuff. Personally, whenever I see biters, I roll off. If I have an affix with biters, unless I'm broke, I will roll it off because I just don't want it. As you can tell, I rarely take this thing. There are two specific uses for biters that I think they do really well. So number one, if you're into aspects, if you take the menagerie aspect, I think is what it's called, it gives you an extra 25% damage for every pet, quote unquote, every pet that you have. Swarm drops 8 biters. So right off the bat, you're getting, I think it's 8 biters. Yep. So right off the bat, if you're using that aspect, you're going to get plus 200% damage. So you're getting triple damage or whatever it comes out to. You're getting a ton of damage right off the bat. So that's great for it. The other use for this, and hear me out, I saw a video, we're going back years. There was a Dead Cells player named Alembic Overflow, I think was their name. And they had a video where they did Swarm Grenade and Hokuto's bow. And it actually was pretty sweet. Because the Swarm Grenade, it's like, what is it, every 10 seconds? Yeah, so you get a 10-second cooldown, 18 base damage, you know, goes up based on your scroll count. You have 8 biters, so if you want to do the math, 8 biters at high scroll count, 144, we're looking at over 1,000. But anyways, if you have Hakuto's bow, it'll increase that damage amount, so that way it will have the biters do more damage, but then those enemies that are marked with the Hakuto's bow will then spread that mark to other enemies. The biters will go towards the nearest enemy, so you can almost set off like a chain reaction to have biters kind of like make their way across and do a bunch of damage. Again, very specific. I feel like it's something that you need to play at a distance, so that way the enemy patterns don't get interrupted. That way you can kind of watch the damage from afar. I don't remember what the rest of their build was, but I'm gonna dig that video up, and I'm gonna pop it in the description in case anybody wants to see that in effect. But outside of those 2 things, personally, I don't really find a use for this grenade, just because, like I said, I don't like biters. I don't like the mechanics. I don't like things that throw additional timing in positioning and attack stuff into the mix. I'm not crazy about it, so I rarely will take Swarm. Swarm. Can you tell that I'm from Boston? I just said Swarm. I rarely take Swarm. Next up is the Magnetic Grenade. This is an item that got changed in, again, could be 2.1, could be 2.4. What it used to do, it was almost like, think of the idea of like a really weak Tesla coil. So you'd throw it down, it would have all of these little bolts of lightning come around, do a little bit of damage, and then it would pull enemies in towards there. So it would pull them in, it would group them, so that way you can use something that's a little bit more localized to do damage. It used to scroll with both brutality and tactics, so you could like use it to pull a bunch of enemies close and then toss a fire grenade to nuke them all, whatever it might be. Now it's tactics only, and what it does is it sort of like has this giant, it has like a really big AoE thing, and you'll notice this. It's larger. It's a larger AoE than the powerful grenade, larger AoE than the fire grenade and the root grenade. And what it does is it pulls enemies in, but I feel like, and it does shock damage, so it does little damage over time now. But like, I feel like the amount of magnetism that this item has is not strong enough to warrant its effect. It'll pull smaller enemies in pretty easily, but a lot of other enemies kind of like make their way out. At least that's my recollection of it. Again, I don't use this. Oh, again, I don't use this thing very often at all. Just because, again, like I feel like there are better uses for that skill slot when you play tactics. So I could be a little bit off the mark here, but when I have used it after its change, which was, it was 2.9, I just haven't been able to jive with it. I haven't really been able to kind of like get in the groove with it. I feel like the utility is not as strong or as useful as it could be, especially if you're using this to kind of like pull enemies in. I feel like the old Magnetic Grenade had like a better effect with that, but someone else's experience might be different than mine. And this is an item, all of these too, like anything that's here, it's an invitation for you to agree or disagree and share your thoughts, right? My hopes too is like, yeah, of course, I want these tier lists to be helpful for people, especially newer players who are trying to learn things about the game and understand how items work, or people who have been around forever who just want to listen to a long video, But I also hope that this is helpful for me when I hear from other people saying, hey, listen, man, like, here's another way you can use this item, or like, I respectfully disagree, or like, I think it was on the range tier list. So Nihilist Lemon left like 2 huge comments after watching that video, and one of the things that they mentioned was, I think I said that I don't use firebrands as a main hand item, and there's like, you can, and now I do. It's a great main hand item, just because I was mostly using it as secondary to get burn synergy, etc., but now I use it as a main. I use it as a main source of damage because of that comment. So I'm also hopeful that you know, if folks see this video and there are things down here that I don't use that they do, like, tell me how you use it. Tell me what builds you like to use it with. Tell me a synergy that I may not have thought of. Tell me how I can take this thing into a build and make it shine, you know? And maybe that's not the case. Maybe everyone's going to watch this and say, yeah, you're right. You know, I feel this similarly. But if not, yo, hit me up. Put in the comments. Let me know. I read every single comment I get. And if I will either acknowledge it with the heart or I will respond with words. But either way, if you have any thoughts, let me know. All right. Last part for part 1 here is the Holy Water. So this is Return to Castlevania exclusive. Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. I just realized that this was also DLC, but it was part of a different section. I thought I misordered things. Holy Water is part of the Return to Castlevania DLC. It is a brutality and survival dual scaling item that, just like the Castlevania Holy Water, you throw it on the ground and it will provide a little area of fire. Little pillar of fire. So what you'll see it'll kind of like create flames this way. It will create flames higher, and it just does fire damage. I really appreciate, and I feel like I've said this in almost every video where I talk about a Castlevania item. Like I appreciate the amount of care and consideration that Evil Empire put into that DLC out of respect, because it's like the teacher becomes the student, which then becomes the teacher, right? Because Castlevania inspired Dead Cells, and then now Dead Cells is created Castlevania content within its own game. That's got to be one of those super crazy moments in a game developer's life where you're just sitting there, you know, whoever the artist is, like, making this icon, or whoever's programming the distance that the flames reach or whatever, being like, wait a second, I'm working on a Castlevania item in the game that I am employed to work on. Like, that's just got to be so surreal. That's got to be crazy. You know, that's almost like if I'm sitting here playing guitar, to be like, oh yeah, I'm recording guitar for a Nobuo Uematsu track, you know, like someone who inspired me for so many years. That is a huge fundamental of my own musical understanding, being like, oh yeah, I'm just writing guitar for this dude that inspired my life. So as far as Castlevania lore goes, this thing is super faithful. The legendary version, the item crash, which is a reference to Rondo of Blood. Basically, the legendary version of this does something completely different. It like makes it rain. That's not a joke. I'm not making a money joke. Like, it literally, like, it will cause rain to come down and do damage and do fire damage around the area where you throw it. It looks super cool. It's right out of Castlevania, which is tight. As far as my own play style goes, I do not take it that often, and the only reason is that if I'm looking for fire, I'm going to go to the Fire Grenade. Because this has such like a limited spot, and I feel like my play style when I'm playing brutality is a little bit more fast, so I'm not kind of like sticking around to watch enemies kind of be in that pillar of fire. I don't take it that often, but that said, it does have its utility. If you have an enemy, here you go, right? It's survival. So if you have an enemy that's trapped in your wolf trap or slowed in your crusher, and you throw this down, they're not going anywhere. They're going to take a ton of damage. Survival build, take a root grenade or stun grenade, and then throw the holy water. They're not going to move. And that extra pillar flame, I think it got buffed in 3-4. Yeah, it's not here, but I feel like it got buffed. The damage got buffed in Clean Cut, so it does a little bit more damage than it did initially on its release. But overall, I don't use it that often, but I see reasons why you should use it. And again, if I'm going for fire, I'm going here. I will take it if it's legendary, just because it's like a super sick Castlevania reference, but I don't use it that often. And again, there's no bad. It's not bad. I just get more fire utility out of, Flamethrower Turret or Fire Grenade or whatever it is. All right, so we have made it to the end of part 1 of our skills, grenades, turrets and traps video, there is an asterisk. I'm gonna put this here. I'm gonna put this here. Single take asterisk, meaning that there will be 2 single takes for this video, so that way I can do it in 2 chunks. It's gonna be a long one. How long is this here? Let me open up Logic. Oh my god. 2 hours and 29 minutes is what my Logic says. Can you see this? Look at that. 2:29. We're going on 2.5 hours here. There's no way this has been 2.5 hours. Good grief. Yeah, so an even better reason for me to stop. Go get some food. Go chill out. That has to be wrong. That has to be wrong. It's got to just be an hour. Dudes, dudettes, and neither. This is something. Anyway, I'm gonna cut it here. The video is gonna be seamless for you. This is gonna be the equivalent of one of Modesto's videos where he says, "Oh, hold on, my friend's calling. Okay, I'm back." That's gonna be what's happening here. So I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna go get some food. I'm gonna go center myself, and then I'm either gonna record the next part either later tonight or sometime soon over the next day or 2. Doesn't matter, because the next part for you is gonna be happening right now. And we're back. I hope you enjoyed the half a second between when I left and when I came back. I made myself some dinner. I drank some water. Took some deep breaths. Chilled out. I'm feeling pretty good. I also, recently, over the past month or so, I've been trying to cut out sugar. And I ate a lot of sugar yesterday, and I had some sugar today. I went back and I listened a little bit to what I recorded earlier. Slightly unhinged, but it's cool, right? It's all good. So here we are. We're back at part 2 of the one big video. So we just did grenades, we did traps, and now this is going to be our second single take, so we can get through all of the powers. There are a lot of powers here. So these skills or powers, I forget exactly how they call them, skills or powers. What are we looking at? Powers. So the powers here, there's a lot of different things. So these are basically your secondary and supplemental items that don't necessarily fit in the framework that the other skills, the turrets, the traps, the grenades have. A lot of these are wild cards. A lot of these are super interesting. They affect your build in ways that main items can't. I like a lot of these. I use a lot of these. I think we all do. That goes without saying. But what I'm trying to say is that there are some of these here that I lean into pretty heavily that I'm stoked to talk about. So we're gonna start with Tonic, and the reason we're starting with Tonic is because this is the only power in the entire game that is unlocked by default. Everything else you see here, from Death Orb all the way down to Bat Volley, everything else requires a blueprint, some kind of unlock condition. But when you start a game, you get Tonic. The way that Tonic works is like I talked about with some of the traps in Emergency Door. It easily has affixes where enemies bleed, creates a toxic cloud around you, burns the ground around you. So on its own, it's decent for that. But what its actual usage is that it will grant you a chunk of missing health as bonus health. So you can see that that's in blue here. So basically when you are using an item like Tonic or Legendary Phase Flask or Vampirism, or I think it's the Barricade card, you get bonus health. And you'll see that on your HP meter as like a blue chunk off to the right-hand side. So you have your regular orangey yellow health, and then, oh wait, it's green. Malaise is orangey yellow. You have your usual green health, and then a little bit of bonus health, blue health on the side. So this is survival scaling only and always unlocked. And what it will do is it will give you that extra health, it will give you some damage reduction, and it will give you some affixes. From a beginner's perspective, even though I feel like this is more algebra than what's needed in like a normal Dead Cells item, if you're on like the beginner's spectrum of players and you're still trying to figure things out, and you know, you might be taking extra damage when you don't expect it, or you're losing your runs a little bit more frequently, I think something like Tonic is helpful because it's going to give you buffer. It's going to give you more of a chance. And the thing is too, so like let's say this gives you 40 extra points of health. If you take 36 points of damage while this bonus health is active and it goes away after your 9 seconds, you don't lose any of your regular health. So that bonus health is, like it says, it's bonus, but basically it just gives you buffer to take extra damage that isn't going to actually affect your main health pool. So on its own like that, it's helpful. I feel like as players get more comfortable with the game, as they experience different builds, get a little bit more used to enemy patterns and boss patterns, I feel like Tonic just kind of falls off, in my opinion. It is good for the affixes, like I mentioned, and another use for this, and I forget, I wish I could give credit to this person. I can't remember who I saw do this or who I saw write about it, but it's also like a really good item to take with you into challenge rooms. So even if you're off color, if you're going into a challenge room and you don't have Masochist or you don't want to tank any damage, you can take this with you, get the bonus health for extra protection, and then you can just wait. You can wait on a platform, you can wait on a ladder for that 30-second cooldown to finish, and then you can use it again, just to give you a little bit of extra prevention from damage. That's a great use. So right now, when I take Tonic, that's why I take it. I will take it either if it has some killer affixes on it, and I'm trying to get that stuff into a build, or if I'm going into a challenge room and I need a little bit of extra buffer. Some days, I don't know if everyone can relate to this, but some days I just play so sloppy. I play so sloppy that I need like every piece of bubble wrap that I can get, and Tonic does that for me. Other than that, you know, off color, there are better options for me. On color, there are other things that I prefer to take. So I feel like Tonic is like a very specific item that I use in very specific ways. But like I said, on the earlier spectrum of playing, or even, and I don't want to exclude anybody by saying that. And I'm not saying, you know, you need Tonic to beat the game if you've just started. I'm just saying that, you know, similar to like YOLO and other things, like this can be a useful tool to have in your tool belt. So if you need it, use it. If not, like everything else, recycle it. Move on. So we have Death Orb. I mentioned my friend Bags earlier in the episode. He called this the spiritual buzzsaw once. And I've never been able to shake that to the point where I wish that instead of this being called Death Orb, it was called spiritual buzzsaw. It's something. So the way that Death Orb works, it's survival only, just like Tonic, survival only. You activate the skill, and it basically like opens up a black hole. And I know I've said this. I think I said this in the Modesto collaboration video we did, and I might have said it before, but one of the things about Dead Cells that flies under the radar, I feel like, because there's so much other stuff going on, there's so many items, there's so much stuff to learn. Some of the stuff, in my opinion, that falls under the radar is how amazing the particles are in this game. The particle, what do you call it? Particle effects? The engine that they use, the particle effects, whatever the technical term is for it. The particle effects or the special effects of Death Orb are so good. So it opens up like this black hole that like circles and like makes its way across a horizontal plane. And around it, there's like this little almost looks like electricity that changes color as it gets closer to when it's going to dissipate. I don't know the exact time of how long it actually travels. Here we go, for 15 seconds. So if it doesn't hit a wall, doesn't hit a force field or a shield, it will go straight across the entire board for 15 seconds, and it's got a 20-second recharge cooldown. This thing is slow, but there are so many areas where this can be helpful. So thinking of a boss fight, if you're fighting the giant, you can hop on his hands when the eye comes out, let a death orb out, and because it moves so slowly, it's going to constantly tick and do damage against the eye while you also attack it with other things. It's great to set up, like if you have a hallway with enemies, you can let that go, move in front of it, and then allow the death orb to catch up. There's so many cool things. I wonder, I'm gonna pull my finder off screen for a second because there are some spoilers in some of the videos that I don't want to show. But if I do death orb, yeah, okay, the one thing I wanted to show is a spoiler, so I'm not going to do it. But basically, there is a lot of utility for this, especially if you're looking for something that's going to chunk some damage in a slow, steady kind of way. So this is like the opposite of something, I don't know, it's like the opposite of a grenade, right? You throw the infantry grenade, it pops immediately, and then that's it. But this thing, it takes its time. It warms up, makes its way across. I love this thing. I love Death Orb. I take it usually, and the reason why I take it usually is because there are other green things that I tend to take just in general, but like, I don't know why I take it usually. This is a really good moment of reflection, because I want to say I take it always, but that's not the truth. I love it and I take it, you know? But yeah, this is super interesting. It's a common drop too. It's a oh, it's not a common drop. I'm sorry. It's a rare drop from the Cleavers, who are the enemies that you'll find like in the Stilt Village, Sepulcher, right? Yep. So it's a really interesting thing, and I like it too because it's unique, right? And that's the thing too, is that a lot of these skills are pretty unique in certain ways. So right off the bat, we have something that provides affixes and bonus health. We have something that's slow, that kind of like takes its time. We have stuff that's really quick. We have stuff that is completely wild, you know? But yeah, I like Death Orb a lot. I think it's super solid. I don't know if underrated's the right word, but again, this is something along like Ice Grenade and Powerful Grenade. I've been using this thing since day one. Well, not day one. Maybe I unlocked the blueprint on day 3 or day 4, but you know what I'm saying. I've been using this thing for a long time. It actually, and it's interesting too, because it actually used to be tactics only back in, back up until 1.4 was only tactics, which is super, super interesting. Next up, we're going to do Knife Dance. So Knife Dance is a pop. It's a pop skill. So what happens is that you will, when you use this, a bunch of knives spread out. And I don't know how many knives there are. There we go, 16 knives. So that's a lot. So, right? So each knife does a small amount of damage, base damage, and also does a single stack of bleeding. But if you get close to a big enemy and you let this thing fly, a lot of times what will happen is that they'll get hit with more than one knife, and it will end up popping the bleed almost immediately. This thing is, I used to look at this and be like, wow, like the cooldown's long and like it doesn't do that much damage, you know, back in my earlier days. But this thing is a beast. It's a beast. I frequently use it. It's brutality and tactic scaling, like, you know, a bunch of the other bleeding stuff. And I feel like it is such a strong option because like I just mentioned, you can use it against a larger enemy and get like a big chunk of damage, a big chunk of bleed. You can take it into a crowd, right? And because the way that it spreads, it's got the 16 knives that goes off in every direction. If you take it into a crowd and there's bats above you and there's a protector to the right of you and there's a zombie without a shield to the left of you and you pop it off, like all of that stuff is going to take good damage really quickly, and it can clear things out pretty fast. I love the name too, like Knife Dance. Like that's just such a cool, I don't know, it just evokes such a really interesting image. Yeah, Knife Storm. Even there you go, another sweet name is Knife Storm. And here's something I just learned. Both the bleed dot and the projectile damage is affected by point blank. I had no idea. That makes this even more enticing. Even more enticing. So I use Knife Dance a lot. If you haven't gotten it, it drops from the bats. I think it's the blue bats, or no, the red bats, right? Yeah, so it drops from these bats. Rare blueprint. When it pops, pick it up, use it, enjoy it. It's good stuff. Next up is Corrupted Power. So Corrupted Power is also brutality and tactics scaling, and the way that this works is you use it and it will pop off some affixes and will also give you plus 50%, so you're doing 1.5 damage for 8 seconds. The downside of this is that you also take 30% more damage during this time. This is something that is generally super helpful, right? So of course, the plus 30% damage is not the best, but if you take the Vengeance mutation with you, it's going to negate some of that extra damage just in case, right? Because I know for me, when I use this, unless I'm in the middle of a boss fight that I'm feeling comfortable with, I'll pop it off and I'll just go ham. I'll just start running around like crazy, trying to get as much damage as I can out of this short time window. And sometimes I get rocked. Sometimes I take extra damage and I run into a dumb situation where I'm between two enemies that are attacking at the same time and I can't stop, Vengeance can help. But in general, the fact that you get such a quick, and it's immediate too, and like I said, the affixes, some of the affixes pop right off the bat and some of them pop at the end. So like this might creates a toxic cloud around you and burns the ground with oil, covers the ground with burning oil when the effect ends. So when you start it, you're going to get your poison cloud around you. And then 8 seconds later, the ground's going to be on fire, or nearby enemies will start bleeding, or whatever it is. There's a lot of really cool things that you can get with this. I take Corrupted Power all the time, and just in general, kind of like I mentioned earlier, we're talking about playing to lose and some other things. Like when it comes to, in my opinion, aside from the usual stuff, right? Game knowledge, enemy patterns, etc. The most important thing in Dead Cells is damage. You learn your stuff, you get familiar with the skills, and you pump as much damage as you can. Like I mentioned in the first segment of this video, you just want to erase enemies off the map. You want them to disappear. And Corrupted Power gives you a chance to not only get extra bonus base damage to everything, 50% to everything, but it also gives you affixes for potential synergy. So I feel like this is a really important skill for me, and I feel like in general it's also just a really, really important skill just to have, because it'll, like I said, you pair it with Vengeance for a little bit of extra cushion, but it's just going to help you clear those maps quicker. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move. I was originally going to do everyone's here kind of clumped, but I'm going to move Face Flask up. And the reason why I'm going to move Face Flask up is because I pair these a lot, and I also take Face Flask all the time. I generally feel like Face Flask is one of the most overpowered. I don't even know if that's the right word. It is one of the most useful items in the entire game. It is, aside me, I think it could be even more useful than Tesla Coil, because it's not just doing flat damage. It has so many applications, from your affixes, right? From being able to proc certain things, but it really shines. Like I was mentioning, you take Vengeance with this. Face Flask and Vengeance are peanut butter and jelly, right? It's Mulder and Scully. It's basically like the two items that were meant to be together, where it almost feels like if you are running Brutality, you should probably take Face Flask and you should probably take Vengeance, because that will... I'm going to pull up the Vengeance stats. So not only does Vengeance provide, you know, a little bit of damage reduction, which is perfect because the 30% matches the 30% from Corrupted Power, but what it does is for 8 seconds, you will have this amount of extra damage based on how many scrolls you have. So if you're going off color, if you don't pick up a single Brutality scroll in your entire run, you take Face Flask and you take Vengeance, your base extra damage is going to be 60%. I have a video on this. I have my Face Flask and Vengeance video, like the first thing I did. I talked more about it in the... I think it's in my mid-game. Yeah, it's in my mid-game tutorial. I talk about affixes and stuff like this, but the fact that you can get this much extra damage so quickly is ridiculous. The extra damage lasts for 8 seconds with Vengeance, and Face Flask's cooldown is 10 seconds. So you only have 2 seconds of time where where you're not going to be doing all this extra damage. If you take this with Brutality, right? Let's say you're doing, I don't know, if you're doing like a 2 BC run, maybe your scrolls are going to hit 25. If you're doing 4 or 5 BC, they should push 30, past 30. But like you're looking at 84, 85, 89, 90% extra damage just by using Face Flask to proc Vengeance, not counting the amount of potential synergies that you can get, not counting the extra 50% damage from Corrupted Power. So let's say, hypothetically, you have an item, I don't know, you have a Balance Blade. It's just a Balance Blade. You have a Balance Blade that does 80% to poison, and one of these things has creates a Toxic Cloud around you. If you have Corrupted Power, you have Face Flask, and you have Vengeance. If you use those consecutively so that both damage buffs are active at the same time, you're going to get plus 50, right? Let's just say in the average here, plus 80, right? So that's 130% extra damage. And then if you have plus 80% to poison on that Balance Blade, one of these procs poison, that's plus 210% damage. That's 3 times as much damage as you would normally do just by using these 2 powers and packing Vengeance in there. It's so good. It's so good. I know earlier, you know, I'm not talking about best or whatever it is, but like as far as mechanics go, as far as the way things interlock, as far as just like general usage synergy, Face Flask is something else. And I misunderstood this thing for so long. When I first got it, I was like, what is the point of this? You know, what's the point of having something that damages you? I don't, you know, it does affixes, but like, what's the point? And then something clicked, you read stuff, watch some videos, and I was like, oh, wait a second, that's actually really good. And that's how in, you know, Modesto's videos, I know I mentioned him a lot, you know, he's a good dude, but like, some of his earlier Brutality videos, or just in general, he'll do that. He'll do exactly that. Brutality showcase, take Corrupted Power, take Face Flask, take Vengeance, and then health bars will melt. Health bars will melt. So if you haven't used Face Flask, take Vengeance, take Face Flask, and just see how it changes your runs. It's something else. It really is. Tornado. Tornado to me is a under the radar skill. So it's a tactics only skill. It drops from the I call them the spinny knights in the Guardian Knights. I call them the spinny knights. So the big knights in the High Peak Castle that spin around. It creates a tornado that will go back and forth on a platform for how many seconds? Like 10 seconds? Yep, exactly. So 10 seconds. So what it does is that it will go back and forth on a platform, left to right. So like, let's say you're fighting the Hand of the King, it will go from edge to edge, back and forth for 10 seconds. One of the things about this skill is it will kind of like push enemies back. It will do tick damage. But to me, the most important thing about Tornado is that it reflects bombs. So if you use this in the sewers where you have the, I forget what the name of the worms are, but you know, the ones that you kill and they have bombs. If you use this in the aforementioned Hand of the King fight, other areas where there are enemies that drop bombs, like this will clean those up. This will clean them up pretty quick. It doesn't do a ton of damage, so you're not going to get as quick of a, I don't know if kill's the right word, but you know, between like knife, you know, more some of the higher damaging turrets and stuff like that, you're not going to get as much damage. But like this is another, I know I've used the word utility before. This is like another really solid item that sneakily provides utility. Like I mentioned, if you haven't really used this, like take this into the Hand of the King fight, wait until he throws the bombs and then throw Tornado and all the bombs will get reflected right back at him. It's really interesting. So because of that, I take this sometimes. And again, I feel like this one just kind of floats a little bit under. You know, there are a lot of very strong things that you can take. Well, Wave of Denial is not really super strong. It's just cool. But like there's a lot of strong things that you can take with a tactics build. So I feel like Tornado just gets overlooked. But if you've overlooked it, give it a closer look. See if it's something that that fits your needs. All right. Up next is Vampirism. So Vampirism is another, I feel like it's a very specific case kind of skill. So what happens is when you use Vampirism, it will take some of your health away so that way you can recover some of your health back and you get a speed boost. So a build where you might want to use this, if you have super low health or whatever it is, you can use Vampirism, take Swift Sword, right? And then for 10 seconds, every time you hit an enemy, you're going to get 2% back, and you're going to get the crits from the speed boost here. You can take it with other things, Balance Blade. You can take it with the Rusty Sword. You can take it with Snake Fangs, like whatever sort of quick kind of melee item that you have. Like this does have a place. I don't use it often. Spoilers. I don't really use this because I feel like the risk reward for it is, in my own play style, is not something that I really lean into. But like I said, it does have its use. And it's interesting too because it dual scales with both survival and brutality. And I feel like unless you're taking like the baseball bat or I don't know what else, maybe Death Scythe or something, like I almost feel like the survival weapons in general are pretty slow, so that way you would have to hit 20, you would have to have 20 melee attacks within those 10 seconds. And I don't know a lot of survival weapons that are going to be able to cover that. Like think of how slow it is to swing a broadsword, right? I'm actually going to pull that up. So let's see how long the time is. Does it tell you? 2.25 seconds. So every second you're going to want to hit twice for Vampirism. Recently I was talking about Tonic having too much algebra. I'm turning into like math teacher. I'm leaning way too in the algebra right now myself. But it'll hit 3 times over 2 seconds. So it falls below that threshold. You want to have at least 4 hits every 2 seconds. So the 3 combos fall behind. So I feel like when it comes to Vampirism, it's you got to have something fast for it. So it doesn't make a ton of sense for me as to why it scales with survival. Maybe I'm missing something. If I am, definitely let me know in the comments. But yeah, personally, I don't use it too often. If I'm looking for extra healing, I'm going to take, if I'm running survival, I'll take Necromancy. any other color, or even even survival. I'll take gastronomy. Like, I feel like there's other ways to get health back besides this, but you may have like a sweet build for this outside of that Swift Sword thing I mentioned. And if you do, keep on using it. Let other people know what it is, so that way, in case this needs to be moved up, move it up. So Grappling Hook is super interesting. So the way that this works is like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, where you use a grappling hook, it'll reach out, grab an enemy, and pull it towards you, and then it does a specific amount of damage on the next attack. I don't know. Yeah, I was hoping that it would have. I was hoping that it would have the scaling, because it starts with plus 40% damage and then it gets higher and higher. This is something that works best with an attack that is a little bit slower. So if you're thinking brutality, because this is brutality scaling, and my understanding is that this percentage goes up with the amount of brutality scrolls that you put in it. Think about something like Flint, right? Think about Flint. Think about Flawless. If you have like a Swift Sword in Initiative, you can use that and it will proc the extra bonus of Initiative, proc the extra damage here. It has its utilities. I don't think it. I believe this is one of those items that the higher the item level is, so when you start getting up towards like 9, Grappling Hook 9, 10, 11, 12, it actually has less affixes on it, because it has such a short recharge time that you wouldn't, they don't want to give you the normal 6 affixes or whatever it is, that way you can spam them every 3 seconds. So it does have less affixes, but I think it's really interesting, and I feel like it has its utility too, where you can use this to pull enemies off of, like if you're in the ramparts, or if you're on like the higher part of Promenade of the Condemned, you can use this to grab enemies and pull them off the towers and like pull them down so they fall, and have them take fall damage. So it has its uses. I don't use it a ton, but I do use it. And again, I feel like, if basically the opposite of what I just said with Vampirism, if you're using this with a slower weapon, you're really not going to get a lot of return on it, right? So if you have that, like I mentioned, Balance Blade, if you have a Balance Blade and you use this, if that first damage is doing 10 damage and you get an extra 40%, it's only going to do 14 damage. Like, that's not much. But if your Flawless is doing 400 damage, that's going to give you an extra 160 damage, right? So that it does well with chunkier weapons. So keep that in mind if you choose to use it. Phaser is, I feel like Phaser's the opposite of Grappling Hook. So where this will bring enemies towards you, Phaser brings you towards the enemies. And this pairs really well with, it's right here, it pairs really well with the Assassin's Dagger, because it will bring you behind an enemy. It will, I believe it roots them for a split second, and then it does, your next attack does extra damage. Yep, so there you go. So you can do it with Assassin's Dagger. You can take it with Tactics, use Blowgun on it. And it also, when you teleport behind an enemy, it does like a melee attack, right? So, yeah, there you go. So it roots, yep, this is exactly it. It recognizes a melee attack. So if you have open wounds, enemies will start to bleed. If you have Ripper, it will pull the arrows out. So you could, I don't know, take Quick Bow with this. Take Quick Bow and Ripper, and then fill an enemy with arrows, and then use Phaser, and as you zoom through it, it's gonna drop all the it'll drop all the arrows and do all the extra damage and stuff like that. It also has a very fast recharge time, so you can use this pretty frequently. So it's interesting. It's got like a cool utility to it. I use it sometimes. I feel like it's more I feel like it has, I don't know how to say this, like, I feel like it's something that I'll use sometimes and then I will trash it for something else. I don't often play with Assassin's Dagger, but when I do, I try to find this, like just in general, like it, and you know, like I said, taking it as a melee attack, like it will, if you have the melee mutation, it will slow enemies when you go through them. Easy crits with blowgun. Yeah, so I'll take this thing sometimes. Corrosive Cloud. So what Corrosive Cloud does is it will create a cloud of poison and bleed around you for, I think is it 10 seconds? 15 seconds. It has a 20-second cooldown, so you're only having 5 seconds off of it. So it doesn't do a ton of damage, but you're immediately getting 2 affixes for synergy. And the other thing that this can roll is it will roll some of those affixes where it will, you know, electrocute nearby enemies with you within, you know, for 8 seconds, or covers the ground with burning oil, or whatever it is. So this is also a really good synergy machine. There's not much to, it's not much to talk about. Like, it does exactly what it says it does. And I use it sometimes, and this is something that I'll take when I have items that will synergize with bleeding and or poisoning. If I have something that has bleeding and poison and I see Corrosive Cloud, even if it's off color, I'll take it, because that's an immediate 140% extra damage just by popping this thing. And like I said, that cloud lasts 15 seconds, which is a long time. So yeah, I feel like that's straight up right out of the box, right? You need poison, you need bleed at the same time. Here you go. And yeah, you know, I think there are other ways that are stronger, right? If you have a Cleaver with Toxic Cloud affix, and same thing with Sinew Slicer, or Knife Dance bleeding causes poisoning, you know, there's other ways to get it, but I do feel like this is like a good utility. And I also feel like this is more of a second skill, right? So in that example, if I take this on a brutality build, it is double scaling, right? Brutality and tactics. Yeah, if I take this on a brutality build, maybe the Fire Grenade is going to be my primary skill and the Corrosive Cloud's going to be my secondary skill, right? Maybe I have Corrupted Power as the one I use the most, and then I lean on this a little bit afterwards, you know? Yeah, so there you go. Poison and bleed at a discount. Up next, I say up next all the time. I'm reading up next. I remember I did this when I did at least my melee one and probably the ranged one too. When I set all the timestamps and I clicked them all to make sure that they worked, like 90% of the time I click something and I'd be like, up next, up next, up next. So, up next. Wave of Denial. Wave of Denial is a tactics-only skill that drops from the Grenadier enemies, or Bombardiers, sorry. The Bombardier enemies, and it's a rare blueprint, so you're not going to see this thing all the time. And what it does is it basically puts a little bit of a shockwave around you and pushes enemies back. So it does a small amount of base damage, and then when they take a wall, when they hit a wall, they'll take extra damage too. This is something that you can also use, like I mentioned, the Worms in the Sewers or the Hand of the King fight. You can use this to bounce off enemy projectiles. Super quick recharge time too, 5 seconds. So if you take this and you have Hunter's Instinct and you're using your main ranged items for getting kills, the cooldown on this pops really, really quickly. This is another, like I just said about Corrosive Cloud, I feel like this is like another secondary skill. You're not going to want to lean on this as like your primary kind of thing that you're going outside of your normal kit for. But as a secondary skill, I think it's super cool. And again, the same thing is the Grappling Hook. Like what I mentioned, you can, instead of pulling enemies off of the walls and the ramparts and pulling enemies off of the towers and the Promenade of the Condemned, you can bounce them off. And it also just gives you a little bit of room. Right, if you're in in the middle of like a mess, if you're in the middle of a cluster and you just need a second, you can use this thing. It'll push enemies back briefly, and here you go. And you can defensively create some space for you. So, and here we go. It can be used to knock enemies to their deaths off of ledges. So, I like this thing. I like this thing a lot because like I said, it is more of like a secondary skill, and it has its usage in certain situations more than others. Like I don't, I'm trying to think of a level that doesn't have a lot of like ledges. You know, I'm not going to take this thing into like the bank for the most part, you know, but if I'm doing ramparts, like I said, Promenade of the Condemned, I'm trying to go through like every biome in my head and trying to think of which ones have things that you can knock enemies off of, but you get the drift. So another circular skill. So this is Lacerating Aura, and it looks kind of like the Concierge's kind of like red aura that he has around him, like his little spinny attack. So what this does is it basically unleashes a circular storm of nails or knives. I wonder what the actual description of it is. Does it say what they call it? Just says creates an aura. So basically you'll have this rotating circular shield of like, they look like nails to me, that does damage, and also, you know, like a lot of these skills, and that's the other thing too, is I know I've mentioned affixes a lot, like a lot of skills have easier time getting like not easier time, but like they have a lot of affixes kind of like built into their pool, you know. So this is another one where, you know, might create a toxic cloud around you when it ends, and nearby enemies bleed when it ends, you know. This thing doesn't do a ton of damage, but it's really helpful in areas, you know, like I mentioned, you know, maybe you're going through the Slumbering Sanctuary and those kamikazes are everywhere, or you're going through the sewers and there's rats and zombies everywhere, or like whatever it is. I feel like it does just enough damage to get rid of the small enemies and to prime the larger enemies for like one or two more attacks that's going to quickly finish them off. I do take this very often, and I do use this more of like I mentioned, Wave in Corrosive Cloud, or like a secondary skill. I use this as a primary skill, so I'll lean on this a lot. I'll take it into boss fights. It's great for like the giant fight, Hand of the King, Conjunctivius, like things that might be like a little bit slower, or things that have moments of being stopped. Also great to, you know, pair it with something like Crusher or Wolf Trap that slows enemies down, so that way they're going to get stuck in the vortex a little bit longer than normal and take more damage. So you can get this from the daily challenges, and you need to complete 5 consecutive days of it. So unlike basically every blueprint in the game except for Swift Sword, which you need to do one daily challenge, you have to play daily challenges 5 days. They don't have to be in a row, but you need to wait like 5 days to unlock this. And then Meat Skewer is the other one. You have to do 10 daily challenges in a row, which you know, a week and a half is like a long time. But unfortunately, you can't just start a new save file and unlock this. You gotta put in the small amount of time every day to get that daily challenge. But once it's unlocked, I think it's worth it. Wings of the Crow. So Wings of the Crow is wild. I'm going to preface this before I praise it. I take it sometimes. I don't lean into this all the time. For me, the movement can get a little bit, I don't know if distracting is the right word, but the movement is just different than anything else that you use in the game. But it's incredibly powerful. So what this does is it, like, you levitate off the ground. It has a cloud under you that does shock damage. You move super fast, and I believe all your melee items also do shock damage. No, everything. So all of the weapons, melee and range, will apply shock damage. When you dive slam, enemies get hit with lightning and they do extra damage. You can roll longer. It's super, super interesting. It's very wild, but it requires a very specific mindset to use it, in my opinion, just because it completely changes the movement and stuff. I know I mentioned Lemon earlier, like he does builds where take Tranquility, you take Wings of the Crow, you do dot damage, and as you move quickly away from the enemies, they take extra damage from Tranquility. It's really, really powerful. My own personal playstyle, I do take it sometimes. I don't lean into it as much. I'm more As you can probably tell, I'm more of like a traps and grenades kind of a guy than like the funky, super funky skill movement. But this thing is, it's pretty insane. If you've been, what's the word I'm looking for? Intimidated. If you've been intimidated by Wings of the Crow and you really haven't, you've used it and it doesn't make sense, take a moment. I'm gonna put a link to the wiki in the description, as I always do. Take a moment to read this over, or just pause the video and read it. Learn a little bit about how this is. Yeah, take it with Kudo's bow. It's got a lot of things that you can do with it, so it's very powerful. Like I said, my own personal play style. It's not something I always lean into, but every once in a while I'll slap on the wings and I'll just zip around and cause havoc. I'm going to, do I want to do this? I will do this. So I was going to group all the pets together, but we'll just do them in the order that they are. So Great Owl of War. This is another tactics only power, and you know, I feel like a lot of these are tactics only. I feel like a lot of the ones that we're talking about are. The way that the owl works is you use it once to activate it, and this was the first pet that came in the game. So you use the owl to activate it. It hangs around your character and will shoot arrows at it, kind of like a faster barnacle that follows you around. If you activate the owl again, what happens is it basically gets angry, I think is the word that they use. The angry owl starts shooting more projectiles super fast, like an assault rifle of arrows coming out of this thing for, I forget how long it is. It's maybe like 8 seconds or something like that, maybe a little bit more. Let's see. Yep, so it's 10 seconds. So you enrage the owl and it does extra damage for 10 seconds. The moment that you press the button to the second time to quote unquote enrage the owl, you can see it gets gets fired up. It will kick off a 34-second cooldown. So the cooldown on this thing is a lot. The unfortunate thing about the owl, and the necessary thing to balance this because of how strong of an item this has the potential to be, is that if you get hit, the owl disappears. A lot of tactics builds do how do I say this? Tactics builds have the potential to do a lot of small damage very quickly. So that way you're not hitting damage caps. You're inflicting damage over time. You're getting a whole bunch of stuff damaged very quickly. So that way the enemies die in a rapid succession. So theoretically, if you have one of those builds where you're just like cruising through, like say you're doing whatever, right? Pick a Tesla coil, or, you know, like I said, the knife dance or whatever it is. Like if you're just, and you have your, I was just going to use a spoiler item. You have your repeater crossbow, or you have your infantry bow, or like whatever it is. And the enemies are just disappearing. Like Owl's great because you're not going to get hit, right? If the enemies don't live long enough to hit you, they can't hit you to enforce the cooldown. But otherwise, you know, and I'm prone to do this too. Like I mentioned earlier, like I get super, super sloppy sometimes. I've been playing this game for a long time, and sometimes it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I just play sloppy, and some days I just don't have it, and I'll try to use the owl and I'll get hit by something stupid and I got to wait 30 seconds for it and I get frustrated, you know? So because of that, and this is not because of the owl, it's because of my own play style and my own shortcomings. I take it sometimes because, like I said, there are some builds where I know this is an owl build. The owl's gonna continue to add, it's going to compound on top of what I'm already using. So that way I'm not gonna get hit. Everything's disappearing. Owl's shredding. I'm going through that cooldown on and off with no problem. I'm not getting hit. It's not disappearing. Like, it's good. But other times I just try to force it into a build. Like sometimes I'll get it off color and I'll be like, oh, that's great. I have an oven axe build. Let me take the owl. And like, it lasts 2 seconds. And I'm like, why did I do that? Why did I recycle my ice grenade so I could take this thing? You know? Historically, it's also important because it is the first pet. You know, this was the quote unquote, the tactics pet. And then they had the brutality. the Brutality pet and the Survival pet, which we'll get to. But it kind of like opened up the door for, I think the word is familiars. Like Symphony of the Night had these where you'd have a sword or a fairy or like a demon that followed you around and either attacked or did stuff. The Serenade is basically a straight up, I don't know if ripoff is the right word. I ripoff has a negative connotation to it, and I don't mean it negatively, but it's basically a straight up ripoff of the sword familiar from Symphony of the Night. So it kind of opened the door for some extra gameplay styles through skills. Here we have Ice Armor. So Ice Armor does exactly what you think it does. It will encase you in an armor of ice. This will allow you to take one single hit without taking any damage and it's the armor lasts for 8 seconds. So within that 8 seconds, if you get hit once, what happens is the Ice Armor will break and it will go on a 30-second cooldown. It also, like a lot of the other things here, I know I've been leaning into affixes, it can, nearby enemies start bleeding, or, thaw spreads to nearby enemies or whatever. You can get some really cool affixes on this thing. You also get damage reduction, like I mentioned, like the Stun Grenade and the Emergency Door. It does provide a small amount of damage reduction. If you do not use the shield, so let's say that you just pop it on and nothing happens to you, you will go on a 20-second cooldown. So there's two different cooldowns. If you get hit, it's a longer cooldown. If you don't get hit, it's a shorter cooldown. Similar to Explosive Decoy, once it's out, you can use the button again to activate it. So if I had an enemy coming towards me, I could press the skill button for Ice Armor and then press it again right afterwards, and it would go off. It almost is like an ice grenade, right? It almost like has like a similar area of effect of freeze. It will freeze enemies nearby. So it's also good for utility if you're just trying to get yourself out of a pinch or freeze some enemies to get extra damage for your plus 175 on frozen targets weapon or whatever it is. Incredibly, incredibly useful. Even though this is survival only, it does not need to be taken with just a survival build. This is an item similar to the Corrupted Power. Like, there's a bunch of things that you can take no matter what the color is, because the effect that it has doesn't change. The only thing that changes with this is the as the scrolls go up is the damage reduction, because the amount of affixes that are on it are due to the item number, right? Number and quality. It's not due to the amount of scrolls, so it doesn't scale with that. Ice Armor is important, and I know earlier I said, talking about playing to lose. I don't feel like this is playing to lose. I feel like this is just buffer, because you can take it in trap rooms, you can take it into boss fights where you're trying to get that flawless fight. And like I said, you can use it to freeze enemies, you can use it just for a little extra cushion. And the other thing too is that this will help you in biomes get that 60 door, right? So if you have 57 kills and you activate your Ice Armor and then you get hit by a slasher, like, hey, good news is you still have 57 kills. You can get those last 3 and then get the kill door and get extra gear. That's going to be a higher quality that will help you do more damage and win your runs, etc. So Ice Armor is great. It's a great utility. The legendary and I'm sorry, my mouse keeps moving. I have a magic mouse. It's so sensitive. The legendary version of Ice Armor makes it so that way it never expires. So you can use this. You can put your Ice Armor on and it doesn't go away until you take a hit. Then it goes on that 30-second cooldown, or you can activate it again. But until then, you are protected from any hit. So if you're, like I just mentioned, if you're trying to get a flawless on a boss and you have some pretty good offensive skills and you just want like a little something to make sure that you have some more insurance, Ice Armor is great. If you're trying to have a utility item that you can use to freeze items and protect yourself, Ice Armor is great. If you want an item that will also provide extra affixes when it's used, Ice Armor is great. So I use this thing all the time. On color, off color, legendary, it does not matter. Doesn't matter. But I should stress too, like I mentioned earlier, talking about these two, damage is incredibly important. So if you have Stun Grenade as one of your skills, and you have Ice Armor as another one of your skills, and then you have the Rampart Shield as your shield, and then a melee item that is, you know, survival melee item that's not doing a lot of damage, like, it's not, like, that build doesn't feel strong to me. That's a very protective build. You stop enemies, you protect a hit. Ramparts give you the shield, but you don't have the damage in order to actually make the run feel more smooth and more successful. So even though I take this all the time, I do recommend that you make sure that your damage is good before just leaning into completely defensive stuff, because that could also put you in a bigger predicament where, let's say you're not doing a ton of damage, you activate your Ice Armor, the enemy that you're fighting isn't dying quick enough, so that way it gives that enemy more chance to hit you, which then cancels the Ice Armor, puts you on a 30-second cooldown, and while you're trying to finish this enemy with a weak weapon, you end up getting hit anyways. So just keep that in mind. So now we're getting into... So out of all of these items, not counting, I only say Holy Grenade, not counting the Holy Water, Scavenged Bombard, Ice Armor is one of the first items that Evil Empire threw into the game. I think the Ice update was 1.4 or 1.5, I can't remember, but basically Ice Armor, Frostbite, Ice Shield, couple other things were introduced in that. Now we're getting to the fun part. So and I'm not implying that any of this was not fun, but every single item that is left in this tier list was developed exclusively by Evil Empire. They got some wacky things. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to go through here has different game mechanics than normal stuff, right? So we're looking back here, you know, turrets they're not similar, but you know what I mean? You have turrets that kind of do a thing, and you have grenades that do a thing, and you have some extra utility stuff that does a thing. And I should mention too, Wings of the Crow, previously it used to just levitate you with the little lightning cloud under you, and you could like shock enemies in water with it. And if you slammed, it would stop. It was not strong at all. Evil Empire took this thing and they changed it. So this was this was given new life by the folks at EE. So all the rest of these are funky. They're, if anything, interesting. So as part of the Who's the Boss update, they introduced items such as some stuff I've already talked about. Flint. Let's see, Telluric Shock, Giant Whistle. What are the other ones? Oh, Tentacle is another one that they did. I think those are the main ones. But anyways, one of the ones that they introduced here is Lightspeed. And this skill is the same skill that the Timekeeper uses when she lightspeeds back and forth across the area. So what it is that you use it once, and what it does is it will propel you forward very quickly in a direction. I know I've said this a couple times in the video, but you know, if you have a shelf or not a shelf, if you're on a platform where there's a bunch of small enemies, Lightspeed will go right through them, kill all the rats, kill all the little, you know, get through the bats, like whatever it is. And then you'll see like this little, it almost looks like a trail, like a little trail in the opposite direction. And when you press it again, it will bring you back. I believe each direction does a different amount of damage. Yeah, so when you dash forward, it does 100 base damage. Then it turns into this icon, and it does 42 damage on the way back. So, and this is, I also just realized that the flavor text changes depending on which type of dash you're doing, which is wild. So this is just like all of the other Who's the Boss update items. Again, Flint, this, Tentacle, and then some of the other stuff we're going to get to. Except for the Giant, it's the first thing that the bosses will drop. So even enemies that came later after the Who's the Boss update. So you think of like Scarecrow. From Fatal Falls, like drops the Scarecrow Sickles. Mama Tick drops the Scythe Claw. So like you kind of get to try on, quote unquote, you like try on the enemy skills. Like it's very Mega Man-ish, you know, where you see something and you're like, that's cool. I wish I could do that. And then you beat the boss and the first blueprint they drop is something that will allow you to do the thing that they do. So super cool idea in general. And Lightspeed is a super cool skill. So I do take this sometimes. I don't have a preference for color. It's brutality and tactics. I feel like it just kind of depends on what the rest of the build is. You know, I'll take this out of the tubes a lot because enemies in the prisoners' quarters have lower health. So I feel like the return on the damage back and forth is pretty good. I feel like you can get right through most enemies like the Inquisitors and other things in one pass of Lightspeed, and it's really cool. And I went into this a little bit in my End of Dead Cells video, and you know I talked about it in the Distillery video too. But like this is, you know, an item like Lightspeed and some of the other things that we're going to talk about shows that Evil Empire were not afraid to shake things up while still being respectful to the series and while still maintaining the level of quality that we'd expect. And you know, there were some updates where things were a little questionable after some of the changes that they made, but everything else evened out great. And you know, this is just one example of many of some really cool different things that are available in the game now. Another weapon, this is straight up silly, Giant Whistle. It is a survival only skill that you blow a whistle, it makes the toot toot noise, the giant laughs, and then a giant fist comes up out of nowhere and hits the closest or the quote unquote most dangerous enemy, right? So most dangerous enemy around according to the giant. I've seen some inconsistencies with this where you would expect it to hit one type of enemy and it hits another one. Like I would expect it to hit an elite, and sometimes on higher, you know, either on lower BCs or on higher scroll counts, you can one-shot elites with this thing and it would hit a different enemy. So I don't know specifically how it targets. Wow, here we go. So this is it. So there's a Jesus. So there's a spreadsheet here. Who put this together? Was it Frukexi? I don't even know who this is, but there you go. So it tells you how the giant whistle target is calculated. Yo, that's that's wild. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is my little monkey brain can't comprehend why it doesn't punch an elite, but that spreadsheet, if you're interested in it, will tell you why. The damage on this is pretty big. So if we're going to go back to, pardon my scrolling, we're going to go back up to the powerful grenade. So I think that was 200. Yeah, so 200 damage, 13-second cooldown. Base damage. Giant Whistle, 500 damage, 20-second cooldown. So it doesn't have splash. So it's not going to do more of an area of effect the way that a grenade does, but it does over twice the damage of the powerful grenade. And it also can like bump enemies a little bit. So if you have, let's say the most important, the quote unquote most dangerous enemy is a bombardier, and right next to it is an archer. If it hits the bombardier, the archer can kind of get bumped off to the side. Like it's not going to hit them both, but it will hit one and kind of like push the other one over. And I've also seen it, if you hit an enemy with it when they're right in front of a chest, it will punch the chest. Like the chest will move. It's pretty wild. So, where's my thing? Here we go. So I used to take this thing all the time. So if we're talking back in like 1.8, this would be up here, like right off the jump. Because there are so many other options now, I take it more sometimes than usually. But it's still super powerful. Like I said, it's great. You can clear some elites out. You can do some huge chunks of damage. Take this thing into a boss fight with Blind Faith on a survival build, and the cooldown disappears, right? At that point, you're if you have higher scroll counts, you're going to be getting 5 or 6 seconds shaved off cooldown with each hit. right? So if you take this into the Hand of the King fight, you hit him for a huge chunk, and then he does this 3-swing hit. If you parry all 3 swings, that 20-second cooldown is going to be gone. It's going to disappear. So with cooldown reduction, even better. But yeah, super interesting skill. And like I said, it's just funny, right? It's just like you're going from, yeah, here's a grenade, and here's the what do they call it? The meat skewer or whatever. And like, here's a whistle you can blow to summon a giant fist to smash something. Love it. Third and final Who's the Boss update skill is the Telluric Shock, which I like to call T-Shock because Telluric Shock is a big word. Brutality and survival scaling. And this to me is, it feels like a horizontal powerful grenade. So the way that this thing works is it's just like the Hand of the King fight. He will jump up, and when he smashes the ground, all of those like rocks that come out of the ground, and the same thing with those guys in the castle, the enemies that nobody likes, the ones that zip around back and forth and then jump up and slam down on the ground. You can also do that attack with the Telluric Shock. Because of the amount of damage, yeah, so 150, so it's a little bit less than the powerful grenade, slower, lower cooldown. I feel like it's very similar as far as you can get like a nice pop, but instead of it being circular, it's horizontal. I actually take this thing pretty frequently, and it's like the damage is good, but I love it because it clears enemies out. So it, like, you know, like many things that I've said here, you can get rid of a bunch of small enemies with it, but you can also use it to do some big damage on other enemies, and then enemies that are off to the side of where the rocks are will kind of get like pushed a little bit. It's really cool. And sometimes, I mean, that might sound stupid, but sometimes I take this into the Hand of the King fight just so I can, when he slams, I will then slam after him just because it looks super cool. So the fact that it's brutality and survival scaling gives it a little bit more utility, gives it a little bit more space for build options. I don't know if I would recommend taking this off color, like if you get a colorless or legendary with the tactics build, because the way that it works, it kind of like puts you in the middle. It'll like jump you up and put you in the middle of some enemies, and if they don't die, you know, you might be putting yourself at risk. The other thing you can do too is it almost acts like a third jump. So if you have T-Shock and you jump twice and then you use it at the peak of your second jump, it's going to bring you up higher, so you get a little bit of extra height out of the jump, which is pretty cool. So if you've ever wanted to slam down like Hand of the King, grab it. You will get this on your first, along with the symmetrical lance and your first boss cell, you will get this on your first Hand of the King kill. Pollo Power. This is one of the items that came out of the Everyone Is Here Volume 1 update, and it is an homage to Guacamelee, which is a luchador-themed, cel-shaded 2D Metroidvania. One of the things that you can do in that game is turn into a chicken. So, of course, when it came time to do crossovers, Evil Empire was like, hey, we should let people turn into a chicken. If you haven't seen Pollo Power, it's something. It's something. I'm gonna pop up my Finder again and see if I can grab some quick footage. Let's see, is this gonna open? So, there's a volume on this thing. All right, we're gonna get a little bit of volume here, but watch. You just turn into a chicken. You just turn into a chicken and just drop a bunch of bombs, and it's so stupid that it's good. It's so stupid, and it feels so strange, but it is very strong. It has a short cooldown. I think this is also a 10-second cooldown. Where's Pollo Power? Yeah, 10-second cooldown. I believe the eggs are melee. I'm pretty sure that they count as melee because you can take this with combo and if I'm not mistaken, combo will tick up. So if you get this thing red off color, or if you get it legendary and you take it with a brutality build with combo, like, it's crazy. Pair it with Instinct of the Master of Arms for cooldown on crit, and you're getting a crit. How many? 16 eggs. 16 eggs. So that is 16 critical hits in less than 4 seconds. So this cooldown will melt pretty quickly. So I am not ashamed to put this in the usually category. I think it's fun. I think there's room for it where you can like use it at the edge of a platform and basically just like turn around so your chicken butt's hanging off the edge and just drop eggs on enemies below. You can activate this right next to an elite, and if it hits the elite, the eggs will kind of like each hit will kind of like interrupt it a bit. You can kill an elite with one use of this thing. My recommendation is to not overlook how ridiculous of an item this is and give it a shot. On the downside, your movement is limited because you're kind of like running around like a chicken, and your jump height is different and you can't double jump. So you don't want to do this and then try to double jump up a ladder when you're a chicken. It's not going to work. I don't think that sentence has ever been said in the entire history of the English language. You're not going to want to use this and try to double jump up a ladder when you're a chicken. I don't even remember. Movement. So you can't double jump. So the movement's a little funky, so you kind of got to get used to that, but it's something special, I'll tell you that. And because it's part of the Everyone Is Here update, it's free once you engage with the Guacamelee statue in the prisoner's quarters. When you see that lore room, it will pop out and will be unlocked forever after that. And if you do like Metroidvania games and you haven't played Guacamelee, it's almost like a little bit like a brawler too, because there's a lot of combat moves, and part of the way that you interact with the enemies is like, because it's a luchador, it's like a wrestling kind of thing. You can grab enemies and slam them. The art style's really interesting. It's funny. I played both of them. There's two of them. If you are into that type of game and you haven't checked them out, I recommend them. Side note, had a lot of fun. I played both of them back to back right at the beginning of COVID, and it was basically, there's like 2 or 3 days that are just a blur of trumpets and turning into chickens and really bad jokes, and the game. Both games were so much fun. Diverse deck is unlike any other item in Dead Cells because it's four items in one. If you've used Diverse Deck, this is going to make sense. If you haven't used Diverse Deck, it might be a little bit confusing. I'm going to try to explain this the best way that I can, and I'm going to pull up the wiki page too, so that way we can see all four cards. So instead of saying draw, passive, and discard, let's think of this as on, passive, and off. When you first pick up the deck, it will always default to Barricade. So you'll see the red, and as you can see, each card has a different icon on it. It's got a different color. And each one, my understanding, I haven't played a lot of Slay the Spire, but my understanding is that each one of these corresponds to a skill that one of the characters has. I know this is Ironclad. I can't remember like the poison one, and I can't remember, was it a robot? I'll look it up, whatever it is, but each one of these kind of corresponds to a certain play style, because you can play as different characters in that game. So whenever you pick up the Diverse Deck, it will start on Barricade, and as you cycle through each card, it goes in order, and then it goes back to the beginning. So Barricade, and it's interesting too, because I'm pretty sure once you pick this up, it automatically has a cooldown, and you have to wait for the cooldown. So when you draw it, you get, or when you pick this up, you'll have bonus health, just in general. Every time you parry, it will give you bonus health for 15 seconds while you just have the skill equipped. when you're not pressing any buttons, when you have Barricade in the skill slot, every parry will give you extra bonus health for 15 seconds. So within 5 seconds, if you parry 5 times, you get 50 bonus health on top of the 30. If you press the button that the card is on, it discards it or it turns it off, and it will have this effect where all of the bonus health that you have disappears, and it deals damage based on how much you have. Then it moves on to the next card, right? It moves on to Catalyst. Catalyst it doesn't have an effect where it comes into play, but when it's active, as in when you, just like I said with Barricade, when you have Catalyst in your skill slot and you're not touching it, you don't activate it, it's just there. Every time you hit an enemy with a melee attack, it will, not every time, but your melee attacks will do poison. It used to do poison on every single hit, and they nerfed it because you could get like so many poison stacks with something like Balance Blade or Snake Fangs or whatever it was, that they had to like make it a little bit more reasonable. But it's great because this particular effect will not only give you extra options for synergy, and immediately if you have a melee weapon that has plus 80 to poison, immediately giving you that damage, but because it will stack, when enemies die, the poison will spread, and it just kind of has like a chain effect going across enemies, especially when they have like lower health. Like you'll see that rats, like you kill rats that have higher poison stacks and it just spreads. This is a very useful, in my opinion, this is a very useful utility. When you press the button to discard or turn the effect off, nearby enemies all their poison stacks disappear, and then any potential poison that they would have gotten will do damage. So if you have an enemy that has 3 poison stacks on it, all 3 will disappear, and then they'll immediately take a bunch of damage. Then it switches to Electrodynamics. When it switches, Electrodynamics, and you've probably seen this, a lot of people use this card in particular just because of how strong it is. It will have a lightning orb, and it circles around you. Just one little orb that spins around you. It does shock damage when it spins around you, and it also has affixes where it can apply oil. You can get plus 40% to, I think it's plus 40. It's either 30 or 40. I think it's plus 40 to electrified damage, so you're immediately getting plus 40 damage on this thing. Whenever you have another skill, it will create another orb. So let's say I have this in one slot, and then in my other slot, I have a Powerful Grenade. The first time this cycles through, I have one orb. When I use my Powerful Grenade, a second orb will come out, and it will start spinning around. Powerful Grenade has a 13-second cooldown. Once that comes down and I use the Powerful Grenade another time, a third orb will come around. So the more orbs there are, obviously, the more damage they're going to do because you're hitting twice or 3 times as much. The shock damage is going to spread, etc. The amount of passive damage you can get with this thing is incredibly powerful. So you can have this and run through whatever, right? Run through the Sanctuary, run through, pick a level, any level. Not only are you gonna zap and obliterate all the small enemies that have low hit points, but you're also gonna start doing DOT. You're gonna do damage over time on the larger enemies, and the shock damage is gonna start bouncing around between them. This is wild. This is super wild. Out of all of these skills, I think I lean on Electrodynamics the most, just because of how fun it is, just because of how, I don't know if easy is the right word, but just how easy it can be to get damage, to get affixes, to get shock, whatever it is, and just to have all this extra stuff. Take it into the giant fight. Take it into the giant fight, jump up on the hand when the eyeball comes out, and just watch how much damage the giant takes just from this thing. It's really powerful. When you activate the item again to turn it off or to discard it, it then goes to the next item, which is Foresight. Foresight prevents one source of damage, so similar to like Ice Armor, right? But what happens is that you take that damage, and then there's like a little, I can't remember if it's like an eyeball icon above your head or like a little red X with an eye. I can't remember specifically what it is, but you'll see something above your player's head that shows you that Foresight is not active. its icon will have a number on it. It'll either say 8 out of 8, which means that it's active, or it'll say 0 out of 8 or 4 out of 8. Every time you kill an enemy, that will go up. So if you get hit, it's going to say 0 out of 8. You'll have that little icon above your head. Kill 4 enemies, it's going to say 4 out of 8. Kill 4 more, it's going to say 8 out of 8, which means it's ready to use again, and that little icon's gone. So this is also something that you can take if you are looking for a little bit of extra damage mitigation for certain areas or boss fights or whatever it might be. It's useful. I think it's really useful. When I first started playing with Diverse Deck, I used to use Foresight all the time. Now when I get it, like I said, I'm going to lean into Electrodynamics. I'm going to grab Catalyst because I'm generally, unless there's a more specific situation that I'm in, I'm going to try to get damage over preventing damage for the most part. But just like Electrodynamics, in a different way, Foresight is incredibly powerful. So even on lower BCs, right? Let's take Promenade of the Condemned. I think there's, on 0 BC, there might be, 80? Let's say there's 80 enemies in there. That means that if you take a hit every 8 enemies, you will not lose any health that whole biome. So it's like a really tight utility. So then when you discard it, you're invincible for 2 seconds. When you turn it off, you activate it, and then it cycles back to Barricade. So this one item is actually 4 items that all do different things, but they all have kind of like a unique connection to as far as how you use them and how they cycle. So that was a very long explanation. Hopefully that made sense. If you haven't used and experimented with Diverse Deck, I highly recommend it, because again, there's something for every style here, right? And it's interesting too, because the colors are a little bit different, but Barricade is basically like your survival, right? You're going to get extra bonus health when you parry. So even though this is a red card because Ironclad's red, this is like the survival option for the card. Catalyst, poison damage, even though poison is technically a tactics for the most part thing, you're doing melee attacks, and the faster your melee is, even though there's a cooldown on how quickly the poison stacks, like you're gonna generally take this, kind of with like a brutality style build, Electrodynamics, shock damage is tactics, so here's your tactics thing, and then Foresight is just colorless, all over, whatever, take it with any build, take it any color. And the other thing that's interesting too is that this deck does not have a color to it. So it's not like you can pick up a brutality diverse deck, or you can pick up a tactics diverse deck, or whatever it is. It's always colorless, and you can only have one copy of it. Generally, when you get a legendary item, you can have 2 of those items. So if I have a powerful grenade, and then I find a legendary powerful grenade, I can put that legendary in the second spot, because legendary items will allow you to have 2. So I can have 2 powerful grenades. If I have a diverse deck and then I find a legendary diverse deck, I cannot have 2 of them. The legendary will need to replace the one that I have. So just like a minor side note, but super long-winded explanation aside, diverse deck is like, it's something. Clearly I just talked about it for like 3 hours, but yeah, I love diverse deck. Like I said, there's 4 different functions to it. Each one has its place. You can take them with the things that I just said. Like, yeah, you can take Electrodynamics in a tactics build. You can take it in a survival build, right? You can take Barricade with tactics build with parry shield or knockback shield, like whatever it is. Like there are so many different ways. You guys can't see me, you folks can't see me, I'm like interlocking my fingers aggressively to say, like, there's so many different ways that these different items or these different cards in the deck will interlock with other parts of the game and open up playing styles to give you an advantage in a way that, like, it's just so unique compared to other skills. So I take this thing all the time. If you haven't checked it out, definitely get into it. I just kind of went over like the general descriptions here, but each one of these has their own wiki, or excuse me, there you go. So the diverse deck, each one has like the diverse deck page has its own sort of section for each thing if you want to get into a little bit more of the specifics about it. So, but yeah, I use this thing all the time. It's a it's a blessing. It's a boon. Pick a word. It's something. I'll tell you that. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Taunt. So, in theory, hear me out. In theory, Taunt is a good idea. So the way that this works is that you use the skill, it's a brutality skill. You use the skill, and then a nearby enemy will, I think the word they use is pursue, like relentlessly pursue you or something like that. Frantically pursues you for 20 seconds, but it takes 75% more damage from melee attacks. So you have an option or an opportunity to get some of that extra damage, like when I was talking about Face Flask and Corrupted Power earlier. Stack it up, right? The problem with this, in my opinion, is that the quickness, frantically is an appropriate word. The amount of speed and the quickness in which enemies will attack you when you're taunting them makes it almost impossible to get a melee attack off. So it's like you almost need something else to crowd control the enemy before you can get that extra damage. And to me, it's not worth it. I've tried to do taunt showcases, and let me rephrase that. Not a showcases and I'm going to record it and show it, but just for me, I'm like, all right, this is going to be a taunt run. Whenever I see it, I'm going to take it and I'm going to try to use it. There's a small window between basically you activate the skill, and then the beheaded will say something. It says something like, like your mother's a corpse fly, or like whatever, just kind of like make some jokes about the game. The nearest enemy will then have a kind of like a plus sign, a red plus sign on top of its head, similar to like a Hokuto's bow type thing. And then it will start to attack you. There's a brief pause between when that icon appears above the head and when the enemy actually starts to go nuts. And the damage, the 75% more damage happens in that. You can get it, but you have to, it's basically like half of a second. So my most success that I've had with this is to use it right next to an enemy, and then as soon as I see that mark, use whatever melee attack I have to then wipe it off the map. That's not realistic though, because if it's almost like at this point, take Face Flask and Vengeance, right? The enemies are not going to do extra damage and they're not going to go crazy and you get a ton of extra thing. Take Corrupted Power, right? Take Corrupted Power and do whatever. So I feel like on paper, I can see the meetings where I can see the Slack chats over at Evil Empire where this was thrown around as a good idea, but in execution, I have a lot of trouble with it. I do not take it unless, like I said, unless I'm trying to make it work. Otherwise, I just recycle it. This is one of the very few, if only, very few items where I really can't justify it. I can justify Swarm, I can justify Vampirism, justify whatever. I feel like personally I can't justify Taunt. So, and you get this through, it's boss rush. I think it's if you beat the second boss rush door, you get Taunt. So if you are subjecting yourself to the punishment of boss rush and you'd like to continue to subject yourself to punishment, grab Taunt. See how it goes. So we're starting to get into the DLC. So we have 2 items from the Bad Seed DLC. We have 4 items from the Fatal Falls DLC. 1 item from the Queen in the Sea, and then 3 items from the Return to Castlevania DLC. For those of us who have completed 5BC, you're going to notice that there is a skill that I'm not going to talk about because it is a spoiler, and I am not going to include it in this video. I will say that is a skill that I take either not often or sometimes, depending on my mood. depending on how jolly I'm feeling. But I do not want to get into specifics out of respect for some of the other folks, because even if I mark it as a spoiler, the icon's going to be up on the screen, and I prefer for that not to happen. So if anybody's curious, when you unlock that skill, sometimes I take it, sometimes I don't. Take it for, kick the tires, take it for a spin yourself, see what you think. But that's the last non-DLC skill. So let's get into the Bad Seed DLC. So number 1 is Smoke Bomb. So I think I'm pretty sure it's brutality and tactic scaling. It is, yeah. So it used to just be tactic scaling when Bad Seed first dropped, and I think they changed it maybe in 1.9 or 2.1 or whatever it is. So this is a similar effect as to what you're going to get with the explosive decoy, where you press a button and it makes you invisible, so you can get out of a sticky situation that you're in. The difference, though, is that your first attack is going to do plus 50% damage. So not only is it defensive, like I talked about playing to lose, it's not something that you're using to kind of get yourself out of a situation and run away from. It's allowing you to not only prevent some damage and pop yourself out, but you can then use your next attack to get an extra chunk of damage. So like many of these other skills, beating it to death, you can get some good affixes on this thing. I'll take this every once in a while. I feel like if there was like a middle between sometimes and not often, that's where I'd put this thing. But it is nice when you have something, if you're taking it with, I don't know, if you have a flawless, like again, I'm trying to think of something, because it only does that first attack, similar to what I said about grappling hook. Think of a flint, think of, flawless. If you happen to get this off color or legendary and you take it with survival, think of oven axe, broadsword, whatever floats your boat. But yeah, it's interesting, and it's cool because, it does tie into I think they're called, the Banished, I think, are the ones that they're called. Like, they're the enemies in the Morass of the Banished that kind of like hide up in the ceiling, so you don't really see them, and then they kind of jump down and attack you. So it's got like an interesting thing there. So that's the first paid item. Second paid item is Mushroom Boy. So I don't love Mushroom Boy. I mentioned this in passing very quickly in my my blueprint video that I put out recently. But I called Mushroom Boy the Mushroom Grenade. And the reason for it is that the way that Mushroom Boy works is when you activate the skill, he's like a little pet, right? He's a pet similar to what I mentioned about the owl and Serenade and, Maria's cat. And what Mushroom Boy does is he will run next to you and will charge into enemies, which will then knock them back pretty quickly. So think of it as like a very aggressive, like Spartan Sandals, Wave of Denial, knockback shield, that kind of thing. If you press the button again while he's active, he will sacrifice himself in a big splash of blood and does a lot of damage. And I think, let me see what the actual number is for the explosion. Yeah, so 300 base damage. So I know if I've been using Powerful Grenade as like the de facto damage comparison here, but 300 damage is one, 50% more than the powerful grenade. And what it does though is that it will jump like between platforms too. So it'll like seek an enemy out, it'll blow itself up, does a bunch of damage. So if I have Mushroom Boy, I will use it for that. And the reason why I don't use it for its normal function, where it will charge, do damage, knock the enemy back, this is survival, right? And in I went into this more in depth in my melee tier list video, I'm pretty sure, but back when this was introduced, this was version 1.7. Back in version 1.7, survival had overlap with tactics. So things like multiple Knoxbow, Nerves of Steel, War Javelin, other ranged items scaled with tactics. So in the earlier versions of the game, before tactics kind of got more streamlined and it removed some of the survival dual scalings, Mushroom Boy made a lot of sense because you could take it with survival, have it hit the enemy, knock the enemy back, and then pull your nerves of steel bow back to get a crit from an enemy that just got bumped away. But these days, survival is more about crowd control, slower attacks. Again, I think of where are we with survival, right? Seismic strike, symmetrical lance. Well, symmetrical lance is kind of long, but oven axe, broadsword, even dual scaling things, flint, flawless, toothpick. The list goes on and on. Even faster survival things, baseball bat, shovel. Mushroom Boy knocks enemies farther away, so that way, they might take extra damage and they might end up hitting the wall, but it goes against the credo for survival. So even if you think about survival mutations, a lot of them are parry based. You can't parry enemies that are getting knocked away. So it's almost like this is counterintuitive. And to me, I understand, earlier on, like I mentioned, each color had its own pet. I almost feel like Mushroom Boy belongs in a tactics gameplay because it can do that. It can knock enemies back to allow for safe ranged attacks. You're hitting the enemy with the base damage on the impact. They're getting extra damage when they hit the wall, and then you're safe to attack them instead of Mushroom Boy hitting an enemy down the corridor and then you start rolling after it and then you pull your oven axe back to swing, and before you can even finish the animation, Mushroom Boy hits the enemy again. So personally, I feel like it's counterintuitive. That said, if you are taking tactics, it will fit more if you get a colorless one, or you get a legendary one, or even vice versa if you have a colorless bow that you get on survival, right? Something like that. I feel like it needs to have that kind of synergy in order for it to really shine. This is not something I use often. Like I said, off color, I might grab it. I'll take it out of the tubes for a quick pop of damage. And like I said, sometimes I'll just take it just to use the mushroom grenade. So that way I can get that extra damage, but it's generally, unless I'm taking it off color, I feel like there are better options all across the board with, other things that we can do with survival. So now we're going to move on to Fatal Falls DLC. I'm going to put these in order. So the first blueprint that you can get in the Fatal Falls DLC, the first skill that you can get is the Serenade. So Serenade is also a little convoluted to kind of explain if you haven't seen it. So yeah, this is good. It does have the icons here. So basically it does two things. So when you have it as a skill and it's active, like I mentioned, it's going to fly around. It'll fly around you and it will hit enemies as it's flying. So you're sort of like the Owl of War. It's just doing, you're just passively moving around and it's doing extra damage. When it gets hit by when an enemy gets hit by the sword, when it's in that form, when it's flying around you, you're going to see this little icon above its head. And as you can see here, marks can stack up to 5 times. It has a 30-second cooldown as it's flying around. And if you do not change it into the sword option, so when you press the skill again, the skill goes away, it becomes a sword and it takes over whatever side skill whatever main weapon side that's on. So let's say that you have Serenade in your right skill slot and you have a spike shield in your right main slot, right? So let's say you have broadsword, spike shield. If you activate this in the right skill slot, it's going to turn into a sword in the right main item slot. If this is in the left skill slot and you activate it to turn into a sword, it's going to be a sword on the left item slot. So this is one of the few instances where I feel like it's actually important to choose, if you're going to use this, to choose which slot you put it in. I think I mentioned too, the hard light sword, I think it's important to switch the gun and the sword so that way it's a little bit easier to use. But this one, if you are using it, I would generally recommend, based on common playing styles to put it in the left skill slot, so that way it takes over your main hand, or vice versa, depending on however you'd like to play. But when I use this, I like to put this in the left skill. So anyways, it'll fly around, it'll hit enemies, it'll mark them with this red icon, and then when you press it again, it turns into a sword. The cooldown pauses, so you'll see the number on the icon. The cooldown will pause, and then what happens is you can hit the enemies with the sword. You swing it around, and any enemy that has a red status thing on top of it will take a crit. So basically what you can do is you can have the sword swinging around, have it hit an enemy 3 times or whatever, go to the melee weapon, hit it 3 times, get the crit. And then the opposite will happen. If you hit an enemy with the melee item, it will put a blue icon above the enemy. And then when you switch it back to the power, as the sword flies around, it will hit the enemies that have the blue icons for a crit. Every icon is a crit. Excuse me. As you can tell, this is a very complicated skill because it breaches the line between main items and secondary items. And I feel like this is one of the only items that will do this. This is definitely, for me, as far as brain power goes, this burns me out because of the amount of management that it requires in order to not only get the most amount of damage out of it, but also to make sure that I'm not doing the cooldown, I'm not missing the cooldown, and all of these other things. It's really good. It's like really powerful though. So Serenade, the one thing I don't like about it is that it always, like every 3 or 4 seconds, you'll see it'll talk. Like I think I mentioned in my hidden blueprints video, it's very chatty. So you'll see a lot of visual clutter as it's flying around and talking to you and stuff like that. But it's super powerful. So for me, personally, I take this sometimes, and the only reason I take it sometimes instead of higher, or more often I should say, is because I feel like if I'm going to do a build with Serenade in it, like I want it to be a Serenade build. So it's almost like my main item is going to become the secondary, because the whole purpose of it is to use Serenade to get those ticks, put it in the main hand, get more ticks, and then just go back and forth, endlessly looping in this positive reinforcement cycle until all you're doing is crits. Everywhere is crits, But again, a lot of management, cooldown management, button management. So for me, I don't lean into it as often as other people do. I don't lean into it as often as much respect as I have for it, if that makes sense. But the legendary version the legendary version has no cooldown expiration. So basically, like, you can just use this you can have it out and never have to turn it into a sword. You can have it in the sword and never have to pop it back. So the legendary version is a different story because you don't have to worry about managing cooldown. You can just use this however the heck you want, and that's fine. So again, this is I feel like diverse deck is a big brain item, but this is like a big brain item. But it's, like I said, it's got a lot of potential. And if you're into it, you're into it. You know what I'm saying? Next, we have lightning rods. So the way that lightning rods work is it's a tactics only skill. And what you do is you press the button once, and what it does is it pops a lightning rod down, and then I think it's a 5-second timer that kicks off. I'm pretty sure it's 5 seconds. Yep. So you have 5 seconds to then place your second lightning rod. So what happens is that you'll say, like, the way that I like to use this is I'll pop it down on a lower platform where there's a bunch of enemies, and then I'll hurry up to a higher platform and then drop the second lightning rod, and then between the two, lightning happens, right? So it inflicts shock, does some damage. It, like I said about a lot of other skills, it will have good affixes. You can get burning, enemies bleed, creates Toxic Cloud, etc., etc. So I think this is it's like a nice little pop. I think the cooldown's a little long. I feel like if this was in the 12-second I feel like 12 seconds would be like the sweet spot where it would be like, we just perfect. But in general, like this is something that's a lot of fun between the affixes, between like the little game it's almost like a little mini game where you're like, all right, I'm going to put one lightning rod down over here. How far can I get and how many enemies can I hit without taking a ton of damage in this 5 seconds, where I can then plant the second lightning rod and then use the geometry between the two to get as many enemies damaged as possible. So it's fun. It's funky. I do take this, like, I take it a lot. I take it very frequently. If I see this off color, I will generally take it and recycle something that I'm using, just because it's such a cool thing. Has a lot of utility, and like I said, it's just fun. I think it's pretty sweet. Next up is that all I want to say about lightning rods? It's fun. I feel like I need to say more about it, but I feel like that's it. It's just, I personally, like, I like all the DLCs, but when I look at Fatal Falls, I feel like they did some really fun stuff that kind of like takes mechanics that were in the game, like, talk about parrying or whatever, and shock damage, and like gives you a different way to do things that makes it feel fresh. So up next we have Cocoon. So Cocoon is something that I did not cover in my shields tier list, and I did not cover it in my shields guide. And I recently commented, I spoke with a viewer about it, and they mentioned that was like, hey, like, cool, I forget what it was. It was like, hey, cool video, but it would have been nice to have Cocoon here because it's technically a shield, or technically can parry, but it's a skill, not a shield, right? And I let them know that I would cover and explain everything here in the tier list, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So Cocoon is a skill where you press it, and it right around you is basically a 360 bubble that can parry anything. It will parry normal attacks, right? Like you have a shield and you have a zombie jumping at you, it can parry that. It can parry the giant's hand, but it can parry things that that shields cannot parry. It can parry the birds, the slammers, ground attacks. It can parry the concierge and the sweepers, ground fire attacks. It can parry anything, right? And I just want to double check. I just want to double check to make sure it can parry everything. Does it tell you what you can't parry? Yeah, so because it parries in all directions, it can do all that stuff. So if you tried to use a shield on something and you couldn't parry something with it, take Cocoon. Take Cocoon and you will parry anything. It's so cool. It's so cool. And the other thing is, because this is great. So a lot of the dual scaling, like the crossbows, right? Tactics and survival. So you're losing that shield slot when you have, if you take your heavy crossbow, you take your repeater. If you normally would have a shield, you have to pop it in the backpack with Armadillo Pack, which, as I'm sure most of you folks know, I love, but you now have a parry that you can control instead of just using it to roll, right? So I feel like the utility on this thing is great. It's a little convoluted to get. You have to go through the Undying Shores and find flags that have these runes. So one of them is outside in like the rainy area. One of them is inside in like the cavern area. You find the runes, and then there's a room of 3 doors, and then you open the door that has those 2 runes that you found, and that's where the Cocoon is. I'm sorry. I'm gonna look up one more video, because I just did this on my new save file, because as some of you know, I'm always playing a new save file. It's called Aggressive Cocoon. Do I have it? Oh, I'm sorry. It's not. It's not Aggressive Cocoon. This movie is called Arrogant Cocoon. That's so funny. That is so funny. So let me mute this real quick. So the way that I generally do new save files is I don't pick up every blueprint, because I don't want the item pool to be completely saturated. And also, I know, I've been playing this, I've lost so many cells, I've lost so many blueprints. For the most part, unless it's unless it's Spite Sword or Bow and Endless Quiver. Like if something drops, it'll drop again. So it's not a big deal. So this was I think this was the first time. Yeah, this was the first time I went into Undying Shores. So I did not look around for any of the runes. I just walked in and I immediately kicked open the door that had Cocoon behind it. Coincidentally, right? Coincidentally. But here's a better video of what I was just mentioning, where you need to line up the two runes that you find, and then it lets you in there and gets gets Cocoon. So yeah, Arrogant Cocoon. It's like a good band name. It's a good screen name too. You know, I feel like that's a lot of things. Like people are doing, like I'm doing it too. It's like adjective and then like different names, like Disappointed Giant, like Arrogant Cocoon. You know. Anyways, all that said, I take Cocoon, not all the time, but I take it a ton, just because, like I said, you know, two-handed weapons, great. If you're doing a parry build, great, because you can, you know, if you have broadsword, shield in one hand, and then you take this as a skill, you can parry with your shield, you can parry this, use this to parry the attacks you can't normally parry, all those things. So got a ton of utility. And then last up is the Scarecrow Sickles, which you can get from your first kill from the Scarecrow boss in the Mausoleum. And the way that these work is you press the button to activate them, and they kind of like fly around you in a figure 8 sort of pattern. And as they hit enemies, they will change colors, and after a certain amount of hits, it will start to do critical hits. After 5 hits, they'll start to do critical hits. So this item is a lot of fun to use, where, again, talking about Evil Empire opening doors and doing stuff, like it just makes it so that way there's other stuff. There's like other ways to play the game. And it's really fun to activate the Scarecrow Sickles and then run crazy through a level. Run through, roll through enemies, especially on 4 or 5 BC where enemies are teleporting to you. And what you want to do, it's almost like you want to play keep away with these things, where you can jump or dodge or roll out of the way so they don't come back to you. So if they come back to you, it will, and it hits your character after a certain amount of passes. Yeah, after 2 passes, it will, they'll come back to you, and then that will be it. So one can hit you and the other one will still be zipping around. If both of them come back to you, that they disappear. So the way that I like to use this is I will turn it on, or I'll activate the skill, and then I'll just run around and roll through everything. And at some point, because there's usually a lot of enemies around, they'll start doing crits, and they sort of like follow the way that you are. So like if you run horizontally and kind of like stay on this plane, like they'll kind of also go horizontally behind you. So if there's a bunch of enemies there, they'll get damage. You can kind of like snake up around platforms and ladders, and like it's almost like you're leading them behind you, so that way they'll hit the enemies that you just rolled through. So really interesting. I don't take it always, but like I do take these a lot. I just think it's, like I said, super fun. It's a really interesting and new way to kind of experience. You know, you're not, and this is no slack, obviously, because I love a lot of these things, but it's not like you're just throwing down a turret or dropping a grenade. It's like it incorporates a new style of gameplay into your runs if you choose to use this thing. So that's Fatal Falls. So skills alone worth the $5. Never mind how cool the levels are and some of the other things that pop out of that DLC. Queen in the Sea DLC has one skill, and it is the Leghugger, and you get this as part of the quest, if you want to call it that, to unlock the door that lets you go into the DLC. You do not have the option to, it's like one of the Everyone's Here update items. You interact with the lore room and then it pops out and it's in your item pool. I'm not crazy about it. I feel like this is, there's a lot of things in here that are homages to other games. And I don't just mean crossover stuff. I mean, in Dead Cells, like there are things that are homages to other games. Like even the cudgel the sprite is almost the same sprite as the Night Shield from Symphony of the Night. So there's like a lot of like winks and nods, and I feel like this is a wink and a nod to that game Carrion that came out maybe like 2019, 2020, whatever it was, where you were like this blob and like you'd kill enemies and get bigger, and you know, and I feel like Leghugger kind of follows that. And the way that it works is that it's a little thing, and it will like stick its tongue out to attack an enemy. And when it kills or hits 100 enemies, when it hits 100 enemies, it turns from the little Leghugger into a bigger Leghugger, and does critical hits on bleeding. It will do whatever, I don't know, whatever the base damage is. I'm not sure how, I don't know if that's per hit or if that's what, but does a little bit of damage here and there. I feel like, personally for me, I don't really take this often. And a big part of it is because I feel like when I've taken it and I'm like, all right, I'm going to get this thing to evolve, I almost have to like wait. And I'm on 3.4. I'm not playing the beta for 3.5. So, and at this point that's not out on console. So I don't know if it's changed or if there's an update or whatever. But for me, I just feel like it's a lot of waiting around. And, you know, for brutality builds, there are other things that you can take. There are other better pets you can take. Same thing for a tactics build. So, I personally don't jive with this. I know some people like it. I think Vord, I'm pretty sure they did a Leghugger only run. I know other folks have done that too, but for me, it's just not my cup of tea. So, and now finally we're at the, oh my god, we're at the end of this skill. We're almost there. So we're at the Return to Castlevania DLC. We have 3 more skills. As I've mentioned before, Return to Castlevania has some really, really fun stuff in there. And while I did expect something like the Holy Water, and I'm not surprised by something like the Bat Volley, the Rebound Stone caught me by surprise because it's like a random secondary item that you can get in like Symphony of the Night and stuff, where basically it will bounce all over the screen. Whenever it hits a wall, it will bounce off. And I think the flavor text even makes a joke about the DVDs. So I'm gonna sound so old when I say this, but for those of you who didn't have a DVD player back in the day, some of them, when the screen would go idle, there would be a DVD. It would have like the icon, like the DVD icon, and it would like bounce around, and every time it touched a corner it would change colors and it would just bounce over and over again. So that's what this is for. That's like what the joke is for. But in Symphony of the Night I did that too. So the way it works in Dead Cells is it bounces, it hits a floor, hits a wall, and it always at like a 45-degree angle will make its way up and over and up and over. And then what's interesting is that when it goes through you, so when this arcs off of a wall and it goes through your sprite, it will go faster and it does critical hits. It's wild because, and maybe I'm missing something. I know a lot, but I miss a lot too. It's survival only, which is like such a strange thing for me. Maybe because it starts off slow and you need to put yourself in its way, so you might be putting yourself at risk for damage in order to get it to speed up. I don't know. But basically, once this thing starts going fast, like, it does damage quick. And I have videos where I've been playing and basically, like, I will kick off a Rebound Stone and it will move and I'll start attacking another enemy, and then it disappears and then like flies back off screen and then kills enemies. Like, it's pretty wild. It makes like a nice little, like, the sound is nice. It's like a nice little metallic little ting ting every time it hits a wall or a ceiling. Very unique. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning of when I started talking about Lightspeed, a lot of unique and interesting things. And even though this comes from a different game, it really fits in Dead Cells. Again, survival, I don't really understand it. Again, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's something you folks know that I'm not paying attention to. But overall, like, it's really cool. It's really cool. I don't always take it because, like I said, there are other survival things that I do kind of lean into a little bit more. But it's a lot of fun. If you do have the Return to Castlevania DLC, definitely unlock it. It comes from the Boers, I think. Boers, little spinny guys from from Dracula's Castle, and it's a 1/7 drop too, so it's standard. So you're probably going to see that within several runs or whatever. Really interesting, really fun. Next up is our final pet is Maria's cat. So Maria's cat it follows you around similar to Leghugger. It will attack with its claws, and every once in a while, and I could be wrong, I'm pretty sure this is the case, but like every once in a while, it will randomly do critical damage when it slices at an enemy. It's strange, but anyways, it'll follow you around, does a little bit of damage. If you press the button again to activate it, it will jump on your shoulder, which is super cool. So you can just like walk around with the cat on your shoulder. The next thing is if you activate it again, it will turn into almost like a spectral cat in front of you that does a lot of damage. So the cat doesn't move once you do it. So this is, I've been picking on him this whole video, but like the giant, right? I'm just trying to think of an area where like something's not moving. But like you could go up on one of the giant's hands and then activate Maria's cat, and it will, off of your shoulder, it will do like 3 really heavy, strong attacks. And then what happens is it goes on cooldown, but instead of disappearing like the owl or whatever, it continues to walk around and still do random hits. So it's like, it's basically the most cat that a cat could cat. It does what it wants. It'll scratch things. It'll hang out with you, and you can't control it. You can't control when it does criticals on the ground. You can't, whatever it is, you know. Maria's cat's a lot of fun, and I take it sometimes. I feel like I gotta kind of be in the mood for the pets. Like, as you can see, all of the pets have landed in sometimes or lower, so they're not things that I always lean on, but it's fun. It has the potential to be powerful. It's fun, and yeah, cats be cattin', you know. And finally, we have our last skill, our last power, and this is the Bat Volley. Bat Volley is a brutality tactic scaling skill where you will open your cloak like Dracula, and you'll kind of get, as when you do it, the animation locks you in place for like a half a second or something, and then bats will fly out, and they fly through enemies, and I think if they hit an enemy, they start to do crits. Yeah, so they pierce, and then once it goes through a target, it will start doing critical damage. I take this sometimes, and the reason why I take this sometimes at this point in my, I don't know if career is the right word, at this point in my Dead Cells experience, is because I'm trying to learn it better. I like the idea of it. I love the Castlevania reference. I think the damage is decent. I think that the way that it plants you on the ground opens you up for damage very easily. So I've been taking this a little bit more during my runs to try to work with it instead of working against it. So that way I can use it, time my skill usage, so that way I'm not going to take damage, you know, because it's really cool too. Like when you have a bunch of enemies, you know, you have a couple enemies side by side and you let it rip, goes through, you know, the 10 bats will go through the first enemy and then they'll crit on the second. And I feel like it has a lot of potential, but again, like I said, that way that it kind of stops your animation and you can't cancel it. You know, I feel like it's one of the few things that you really can't like cancel cleanly. It does open you up, especially if you're taking this on a tactics build, right? Because you're gaining the advantage of having a skill that will travel a good amount of distance, you know, like a Death Orb type thing. So you're gaining that ability to be further away to get some of that skill damage through the crowd, but at the same time, you could get hit with tactics having the lowest HP of all 3 colors or all 3 stats. Like, it's risky. So it used to be, I would normally put this down here, but like I said, you know, this is something I'm really trying to work with and learn better, so that way I can utilize it better. Maybe I'm going to continue to use this and it's just not going to make that much of a difference, and it's going to end up back down here at some point, you know, but for right now, this is where it is. And that's that. So looking back, I feel really good about this. I feel really, really good about this tier list. The only thing that I don't feel great about. There are two things I don't feel great about. The first is I feel like I should give this more of a shot. I feel like I should use this more. I know I mentioned that Holy Water is kind of like Fire Grenade or whatever. The fact that it's straight up Castlevania and the fact that I haven't used it a ton because I lean in towards other things makes me want to use it more. And even though this was hours ago, I took like an hour and a half break or whatever between first take part 1 and first take part 2. I still feel, I think embarrassed is a good word, about the whole Scavenged Bombard heavy turret thing. But overall, I feel really good about this. I feel like, yeah, I feel like this is good. I feel like this is a really clear representation of how I use my secondary slots. I think it's has a good representation of things that I feel like, you know, I could use a little bit more on, a little bit more, give a little bit more usage to, or you put in my builds more, I guess is a better way to say it. But like, yeah, for the most part, this is pretty tight. Pretty tight. I dig it. So we have made it to the end. I don't know how long this is because, like I said, I recorded it in 2 parts. I thought at the end of the first part that it was 2.5 hours. It was just 1.5 hours. But who knows? Who knows? Well, I mean, we'll all know when this video is out. But right now, I have no idea how long I've been talking. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. So hopefully this was fun. Hopefully this was enjoyable. To all the folks out there who have requested more tier lists and, you know, more item descriptions and stuff, I hope this was informative and enjoyable. You know, as always, if anybody has any any feedback, let me know. If there are any items here that you'd like to give your experiences about that, you know, you think I should give more of a shot to, let me know. Just pop a comment down below. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I feel like, and I already feel it's funny because, like I said at the beginning of this take, like, I've been eating a lot of sugar recently. My brain's been a little bit fired up. I definitely feel like part 2 of this video is more like quintessential DG, and the first half of this video was like DG unhinged, you know? But hey, take it with a grain of salt. This was fun. And as always, every time I come to the end of a tier list, I don't know how to end it. I don't know what to do. I want to like go back and this and that or whatever, but end of the day, here we are. So thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, even if you just skipped around because everything's in the timestamps, like, thank you for watching whatever part that you watched. Hopefully this either gave you some information for you to build your Dead Cells knowledge on. Maybe this was a mirror held up to you so that way you can have your own feelings about some of the things that I feel a certain way about, so that way you can strengthen the play styles that you already have. Like I said, this is video 4 of my tier list, and there's going to be one more in the series, which is going to be mutations, and I have a feeling that one is also going to be, I feel like that's going to be long because there's a lot of mutations. So we'll see how that goes. But this was a ton of fun. I feel like I've said that 8 times. In case you didn't hear me the first 8 times, it's a ton of fun. This was a ton of fun, and this was a ton of fun. So as always, thanks for watching. Good luck out there, and I'll catch you on the next one.